Hey everybody, I'm Nick Von Walkerworth and you're listening to the Von Dubcast. These intros I usually talk a little bit about the guests, what we talk about, and a bit about my life and what's been happening in it. If you want to skip right to the interview, skip to about 10 minutes. If not, buckle up, let's go. Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 128 of the Von Dubcast. Got a really fun one for you guys here. Guest is Jessie Fiddler. She's a local girl from Slave Lake that I knew of but didn't really ever get a chance to talk to, just knew through social media, and just had kind of a feeling that maybe there'd be a good conversation to be had. And so it's really, I don't know why, it's really embarrassing to reach out and invite people on the podcast. I think it's very vulnerable. I care a lot about it when people say no, or just it, and also it just puts people in a rough spot because I don't want them to feel any type of way if they want to say no. But just had a feeling, and I took that swing even though didn't really know her, and she jumped at the opportunity and was really excited about it, which felt great. And sure enough, we had a great conversation. We talked about a lot of personal development stuff, kind of growing up in Slave Lake, moving away, what that gives you, a lot about travel and the perspective that gives you, and just very similar people, I think, in a lot of ways when it comes to the subjects that excite us. So we were able to really crush through some hours. This is another one of those podcasts where we did, 2.5 to 3 hours, and it felt like it just zoomed by in 20 minutes, which is always a sign of a good one. So hope you guys all enjoy it. I've been having some fun weeks there. I know there's no episode last week. It was tough. I did that episode with Jade, which probably lots of you heard. It was a great conversation. That one really fired me up. The conversation as well, but just how I was struggling a bit with, confidence and where I was at mentally. And Jade was so excited to come onto the podcast, and she took it so seriously and really reminded me of what like the podcast can be when it's at its best. So after that episode, I was really excited. I got kind of the renewed fire, and I think I booked 3 or 4 episodes for the following week. And I thought, in my head, I was just going to be crushing episodes and then going to GP to pack up the last of my stuff and move it home. And then I was even trying to get, maybe 1 or 2 podcasts in Grand Prairie while I was there before I came home, and just every single one fell apart. Everyone kind of canceled on me last minute, and that was tough to deal with. And I had to miss my first week since I started this podcast. And, that wasn't all that fun, but I got through it, and the moving definitely wasn't all that fun. Shout out to my parents for being so helpful. They helped me pack up that whole house, and I couldn't believe how much crap I had. It was a bit of a shit show. Got to get a little bit of jiu-jitsu in Grand Prairie where I was there. Got to see the guys at Champion. That was awesome. I always really enjoy that. That was probably the highlight of my trip back. And then, I got back, have all my stuff here, did the big move in. Watched lots of Oilers game. Got to go to the Oilers game on Monday. Thursday was a big day. I did this podcast that you're hearing today. I did a 10K run, 2 jiu-jitsu classes back to back, and I walked my dog probably, 4 or 5K. And my body was so smoked after that on Thursday. It was just complete banana lands. But I really enjoyed it. Maybe the podcast was Wednesday and all that exercise was Thursday. Anyway, but why I say that, I'm not just trying to brag about the exercise, but I was going to my first music show, and maybe I'll do a solo podcast or something and really break it down. But my first EDM show, Stylist, was at Rocks on Jasper, or I don't know what it's called, some smaller music venue on Jasper Ave. And me and Chase have been talking about going to a music show, an EDM specifically show, for a long time. He's been has tens and tens of experiences. It'd be nice to be able to say hundreds, but I don't know why I found that so funny. He has tons of shows under his belt, and I've always heard all the stories and how amazing it was, and it sounds like it'd really be up my alley. And just throughout COVID, we weren't able to get to one. So this summer, we have a plan to go to a few shows, but this was going to be my first one to try it out and see if I like it, and it was awesome. We went to the Oilers game, watched the Oilers go up 4-1, and then we ended up moving up to the to some box seats for the second and third period, and then they absolutely blow it. It ties up 5-5 at the end of the game, but they won it in overtime. That was awesome. Then we leave, walk back to my truck, switched into our party clothes, and we walked to this bar, and it was just an awesome time. Danced all night. My body was so sore. Like, I remember for the first half hour, it would be like, I really liked when the DJ would kind of slow it down, because I could just unbend my knees and kind of rock just to give my poor legs a bit of a break. But, you get a few more drinks in you, and smarten that rate up. And I just had a great time dancing all night. And I forgot the biggest piece of that. Me and Chase also recorded the last episode of the road trip series that Friday before the Oilers game. So it went podcast, then crazy day of exercise, then another podcast, Oilers game, show, and then wake up at Chase's house just, not as hungover as I thought I'd be for how much we drank. I think just the dance and the movement kind of wore all that off, but just like unbelievably tired, like just next level tired. And I roll back to the house. I just lay down in bed to be like, I hope I can get a little, because I was supposed to do a podcast that day with TJ Foster, who's been on the podcast before. And he texted me, he's like, yeah, I'll leave in half an hour. I'm like, no, like, yes, I'm so excited to do this podcast, but my body is so smoked and my brain. So, got out of bed, did a little bit of a meditation outside with my dog and just, buckled in and had another great conversation. I mean, it was great. TJ was great. I was a little bit, I felt like half a human, like half my brain was fired, half of it wasn't, but I don't know. You guys probably won't even be able to notice. It was just me beating up on myself for what I expect. So that was really fun. And, and also I had to do a day trip back. So I went to the hockey game Monday, and then at 2:45 a.m., got up in the morning, drove over to another guy from work's place, and we hopped in a truck and drove to Grand Prairie, did meetings all day, and then drove back and didn't get home till probably 8 o'clock that night. So it was kind of just a crazy week for me, but it was awesome. It was really nice. I know I've talked a lot about how tough work was for me and kind of why I had to step back, but it was really nice to get back in there and kind of remember what I used to do and that I was good at it, because I was just actually telling my parents this. It was just with depression and stuff, you have lots of negative thoughts. And there was times where I was just like thinking in my head, did I make this all up, that I was, good at this job and I was doing all these impressive things for work? Like, am I, your brain can play crazy tricks on you. And it was nice just to kind of go back there and step back into that world, just for a day and kind of really, almost impressed myself with what I was able to accomplish. And that was great for the old mental health and kind of kick the week into a good gear for the rest of it. Even though it was, 8 hours of driving early in the morning, it was really worth it. And I really had a great time. And, also tried out some new jujitsu, at Gracie Baja, in Edmonton here. It's right by my dad's office. Really nice, layout. There's a couple things, maybe this is better for a solo episode, but it was, there's a couple things I really like about it and a couple things that maybe I miss from Champion. I think it's a lot bigger of a gym. So maybe it's just, economies of scale. They can't really do exactly what they do at the smaller gym there in Grand Prairie, but I really enjoyed it and, got some rolling in. It's nice to get into a little bit of a habit of having some things to do here in Edmonton. I think schedule is going to be really good for me and good for my mental health. So really excited about all that. Other than that, that's a big, I'm always looking for help with the podcast. I'm maybe looking to do a podcast this week, kind of breaking down exactly the different tasks I want to do and bring things on to maybe have something to show for people that might want to come in and help, but don't really know what specifically there is to be done. So that is, another exciting piece. Again, always looking for sponsors as well. Now that I'm in Edmonton, I think I can really start to put some rubber to the road and start working towards, getting, a decent chunk of sponsors on this podcast, which is something that's always been a big goal of mine and something that I'm excited for, not just for me, but I hope to be able to give something to those people that want to sponsor. If they want to give me a shot at bringing their business to the world or to my audience or their product or whatever it is, I want to really take that serious and do the best I can to really show you guys what it is that they're selling and hopefully, make it happen. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on with me. We have a great episode coming up. It's a long one, but it's really good all the way through. Reach out to Jessie on Instagram. Tell her that's always really good for getting people on the podcast. And when you reach out to the guests and tell them that you really enjoyed them and that you enjoyed the conversation, that goes a long way. So if you could do that, give her a follow, all those little things that I always ask. Also me, if you want to follow the Von Dovecast on Twitter, Instagram, all those things, YouTube, subscribe. I know the YouTube is vastly out of date, but that's another big thing on the list to get going. Even though I know that if I do start uploading episodes to YouTube, I'm probably just going to get strikes for misinformation and probably just get kicked off YouTube again, which, I'm kind of joking about, even though that's going to be heartbreaking when it inevitably comes. But what are you going to do about it other than laugh? So yeah, hopefully you have a great week. The Oilers game is about to kick off. They're playing Anaheim right now, and I was just trying to get this intro recorded during the intermission. So I'm going to sign off and hop back into it. It looks like Draisaitl's knee is not buggered. He's out there to start the period. That makes me just very happy. I was getting a little bit worried. All right, see you guys in the outro. Bye. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, this is awesome. I think this is probably like the first time we've actually met in person. I mean, like growing up in Slave, like you kind of know everybody around, but I don't think we've ever, sat down and had a conversation before.
No, I don't. I really don't think
Yeah.
so.
And one of the things is like, I think this is a newer thing, but I've got to kind of get to know you through social media, which is one of those things where you think you know somebody, but it can always be a little different because everyone's different with how much of themselves they put on social media and how, I don't know if truthful is the right word, but I'm kind of excited to get to know you and see how well that matched up with this idea I've created in my head of who you are through social media. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I noticed that quite a bit because even with you, even hearing your voice, I'm like, well, I've heard him on podcasts, but I've never had that one-on-one interaction.
Exactly.
So.
And I feel like that's a different thing. And I always feel like when I listen to podcasts that I know these people that I've listened to, a lot of them, that I know them, right? But you never really know how much of that is true. And it's interesting to see with people like yourself that have said, I've listened to some of the episodes. I'm always curious, like, oh man, how much are they going to know who I am from it, right? And as I do more and more and get more comfortable being more myself and more vulnerable on it, like, is that going to change? It's an interesting dynamic. Yeah. Do you listen to lots of podcasts?
I would say I listen to podcasts more than I do music.
Really? Yeah, me too. I feel like always feel like an oddball doing that. What are some of your favorites? I love when people listen to podcasts.
I would say right now, definitely Aubrey Marcus.
Oh, I love Aubrey.
Really, really good.
Oh,
I've just gotten into
Aubrey
listening.
Just got
to
into him, hey?
Yeah. And just to dive deep into him and just the different people. And there's another one right now. I can't think of the name off the top of my head. But Jay Shetty is a really big one.
Jay Shetty, I don't know if I know him.
He has wrote the book Think Like a Monk.
Think Like a Monk. I've heard people talk about that book on podcasts.
It's a really good book, but he just, it's like a personal and health podcast. He just kind of interviews everyone, and it's really good. There's Rob Dial. He's more like business mentor.
Oh, okay.
There's Payday with Ray Ray. She's like just feminine empowerment, but like multi-millionaire at 27 years old kind of thing. And so,
Wouldn't it be nice, eh?
Really though. So listen to the people that I just inspire to be like or learn from and just take from the people who are doing it.
I'm curious, how did you stumble upon Aubrey? Because he's one of like my all-time, he's like a huge inspiration for this podcast too, and like really changed my life and all of the stuff because I was a very closed off person with lots of the more sensitive sides and spiritual sides of things. And I feel like that was because I'd never had someone that could put it in the right words for it to connect and for me to kind of trust them to go along with it and get further down into the depths of which these topics you need to. If you just hear the surface level, it's easy just to brush off. Oh, that's silly. That's nonsense. But with him, I really was able to connect with him and he brought me down the rabbit hole of so many things that really changed me. And he's one of those big inspirations. So I'm curious how you stumbled upon him.
I think just social media and through seeing different people and then just being really into, like when male perspectives can go into kind of the spiritual side or the healing side. I'm really, really intrigued in because it's not the norm. And he really does that. He gets vulnerable and raw and real and just really dives deep, which I like. But through social media. And
I think that's another really important piece of it too, is like lots of those more spiritual sides. There is something different. I don't know. I haven't really exactly put my finger on what it is, but when you get that from a male perspective, I feel like it feels different because I feel like, I'm trying to almost articulate this in the moment of what makes it different, but because it's so clear that they have the difference. Like just to use Aubrey as an example, like he's a very, it's not like he doesn't have a lot of the male characteristics. He's a very powerful, sure of himself. Like he's done a lot. He's, into sports and he's very competitive in all those realms. And then also has that other side of it. It almost gives it this very well-rounded view of it. And he can see everything from a lot of different angles that really shows the whole side of view. Whereas I think in the past, when I would hear people that are very much, that is their whole world, that, and they maybe lack some of the other side that Aubrey brings to the table, it was harder for me to connect with them because it was, I don't know what it was. It just, it didn't suck me in. And it didn't allow me to get to those depths like I talked about. So that I found that very interesting. And it's something that I'm trying to be, and I'm trying to bring forward in myself to be like Aubrey. I think, lots of times when you do something like the podcast, you're kind of just copying your favorite people for the first bit. And I'm sure I am, I'm sure people could just say, oh, you're just copying Joe Rogan and Lex Friedman and Aubrey Marcus. Like, yeah, I am. Cause I appreciate what they do. And I want to be that person eventually. And I know I'm not there yet, but that's a pretty lofty goal. And I I think that's awesome. You know? Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of steal from the best and make it your own. Which
Exactly.
I've heard lots about, and lots of people like, don't copy, but it's like, how else are you supposed to know what you want to do unless you take from the best and like embody it in your own ways?
And it takes so long to figure out what your voice is and what you want to do, that if you wait to start until you know exactly what you want to do and what your particular brand of it is, you'll never get there, because you'll never start. And it's going to take you 2 years, 5 years, 10 years to find that voice. And if you never start, you'll never find it. Right. And that's where I'm at. And that's why when people, you know, like, not that people, I get a ton of criticism or anything, but you know, in my head, I criticize myself a lot, and I'm always thinking of what could people criticize me for. Right. And I have a lot of, you know, I've talked about this lots on pod, like negative thoughts, and I do a lot of that. And it's, you know, and then to combat and find arguments against that is, you know, I don't care if people were to say that, oh, I'm copying, because I think that's great, you know, and to try and do that. I don't know if that's, again, the most healthy thing to do it, but that's kind of how that's how my mind works. And you know,
yeah, totally.
Can't change it.
A question with the Aubrey Marcus. Do you find it kind of resonated with you because he does have like that really masculine like embodiment, but he does really go into like the feminine, softer sides of vulnerability, and lots of times that isn't common? Do you find maybe that's why?
For sure. I think that's a huge piece of it. And I think for as a man, it's we almost have this innate thing that you're not supposed to go into those and into those areas. And when you can respect somebody, and I think Joe Rogan is a lot like this too for a lot of people, and I think he doesn't get the same respect for it, but like he's a very sensitive guy as well. And someone like Aubrey Marcus, someone like Joe Rogan that I respect for all those, you know, very manly qualities, I really, you know, like I respect him as a man, which sounds kind of silly to say. That opens the door for you to then, that's okay. If Aubrey Marcus, this very powerful, strong man that I respect for all those reasons, is able to go down and show those sensitive sides and explore, you know, the sacred feminine and all these ideas that are very, you know, maybe not traditionally male, it gives you almost that free pass. I'm okay. That's okay to explore those things, right? If someone that I respect that much, like a Joe Rogan or an Aubrey Marcus, can cry and can be open and do all that, oh, that's okay for me, right? And I think that was the first thing that opened the door. And then once you kind of get past that, now I don't even feel that anymore. That was almost something that probably about 4 years ago I was feeling that, and then I got past it. Now I just listen to all of it, and I'm already past that, and I can take anything, whatever subject, whether it's male, feminine, you know, strong, weak, like whatever kind of dynamics you want to put on it. It doesn't matter, because I'm already past that. Now I can just take it all in and try and learn from it all. And I feel like that was a huge step in my like personal growth journey, was to get by that. And people like Aubrey Marcus are hugely impactful for it. I think you hit it right on the head. That's exactly what it was. Yeah. I love that, just because I feel like you had said, it is tough for men to feel like they can kind of have that vulnerable side unless they see it. Right. Which, really interests me when men kind of do open up to it, see it, and then kind of let that into themselves and show through. Because when you see it once, now it helps you do it, and when you do it, it helps others do it as well, which I absolutely love. Like, which I get like literal goosebumps when I think of that, because I've not like I've had a ton. It's not like this podcast is, you know, going to thousands and thousands of people, but I have had, you know, a couple instances of people, maybe not to the same depths that I showed it, but maybe in a little less words, because we're still guys and we still don't like it, but maybe in a lot less words, they've kind of said that, hey, it's nice that you can talk about, and that feeling of doing that, because I know how impactful it was for me, that means the world to me, right? And like, that's what this is all about. And as much as this process is scary and vulnerable and you know, shitty at times to try and go through it, and you're really putting yourself out there, it's so worth it when you get that little piece of feedback like that, because I know how impactful that can be. Not to say that I'm, you know, an Aubrey Marcus and I'm impacting people on that level, but I'm on the right path. I'm getting there. I'm walking in the right direction, and that's very nice to feel. I found, impacting mindsets, changing people's the way they think, or just how they feel, and totally making shifts. I love that. And you know, people do that in a lot of different ways, like podcasts and like social media, and that's something that, like, when like I said, I'm curious to see who you are as a person, like having a conversation versus what I see from social media. But at least on the social media front, it seems like you do and try to do a lot of that, change people's minds, impactful, show things that work for you, and try and spread the knowledge a little bit. Is that something that am I onto something there? Or
No, that's exactly it. Is just shifting mindsets, just bringing into perspectives that are maybe outside their realm or that they've thought of or heard of from someone like that they either do know personally, or just bringing more light on things that I feel like people haven't even heard of or never actually thought of possible for themselves because it seems difficult or so otherworldly or whatever it is.
Right. So do you think that's something that was always within you and you kind of always been that, or is that something you learned? Like where I come from, I think Aubrey Marcus was one of those people that really got the name, you can have this impact on people, and that kind of was something that maybe it wasn't as big a part of me before and now brought it forward. I'm curious, was there anyone like that for you that really impacted you and then you wanted to do it? Or was that something that was always kind of coming from within, that you always wanted to help people and spread that knowledge?
I wouldn't say it was always in me, because I used to be very unconfident. I didn't think I was going to do much or accumulate too much because I wasn't successful in school. So that kind of put a damper on like what I thought was possible for myself and just like kind of shining my light. So I don't really think I had much of that, but when I started to dive deep into different things like either astrology or just like human design or different
things that interest you. Like school is boring and it's hard to succeed when things are boring, but when you find things that interest you, you can find this success and feel that confidence.
Totally. And diving into those things and finding things I liked was like, I like talking about this, sharing about it, and other people aren't into it, but it was the diving into kind of those, like, I don't know, personal tests, certain ones, like, of course you can get ones that like are just make believe, like some of the stuff on there is probably not too true, but just trying to find, like, look at them from the realistic side. But lots of them are that where like they've kind of stated that in those signs of me, I am meant to kind of just go out there, experience things, kind of be just a lone wolf and go through the shit and then help other people kind of see that in my way. And that kind of gave me some confidence with it, because I did feel cocky initially when I was like, I know something that others don't. I want to help teach them. My thing came up, I was like, who are you? Imposter syndrome instantly.
Oh man.
And then started diving into those, and I'm like, like I do have that. Like I do have leadership qualities. I do have things that can help other people move through other, say, tough things easily or shed some light on it. So that really helped me gain some confidence of that part within me.
Right. And I think that's so natural. And that's actually, I don't know if you listened to any of the podcasts I did with Cody Twin, but that was something that me and him really, I didn't realize. I always thought this was something that just I felt, but we were talking about it, and it's almost the natural progression of the journey of kind of going to the being unconfident and unsure of yourself, and then getting to a point where you have that realization, you see all these things, and you kind of open up to what you're going to bring to the world and what is there for you, and kind of how things operate. And then there's this other stage of then it's that cocky stage where this is so, once you see it, it's so obvious. How do other people not see this, right? Like it's so clear to see once you see it, right? And you almost are in an area of frustration of like, how does the world not see these things that are so now obvious to me? And then you get past that, and then you learn to have compassion and to see yourself at an earlier spot in other people of, they're just not there yet, right? We're all on the path. They're just not there yet. And I'd always thought of that was just something with me. And I was always embarrassed of that fact that I felt that way. And then he brought it up. I was like, man, I feel the exact same way. And then we're kind of talking, we're like, that probably makes sense that's very much kind of how things work and how people operate. And that path, it's different for everybody, but it's also very similar. Like in the broad strokes, it's similar. And then everyone's individual person that walks it a little bit differently, right? Everyone dances down the path a little bit different. Everyone doesn't walk the same way, right? It's kind of interesting. And I just kind of wanted to pull it back, because I think this is a very important part that I think a ton of people are going to respond to, is that being a little bit unconfident because of school and that dynamic, and how thin the goalpost for what success is in school is, and how widely variable people are. And I think that is just hugely impactful, because I think there's so many people that go down that path. Even like lots of my friends growing up, like some of the most talented and smart people that just thought, no, I'm dumb, right? Like, I don't know if you know Clinton Miller, but he was like one of my best friends growing up. He's, still one of my best friends, but he always had this self-talk of like, oh no, I'm not that smart. It's like, you're a pretty fucking smart kid. Like, it just, maybe not in direct school impact ways, but like, you're not an idiot. Like, I wouldn't hang out. We wouldn't be able to connect on this level and talk about, like, when me and Clinton were alone. And I think he always hid that a little bit too, because he had this persona of, I'm not that smart. when you get Clinton behind closed doors and you talk to him, he's a very, very smart kid, but it was exactly that, is this weird small frame of reference. And like when you get out of school and you get into the real world, you realize, oh, that shit in school of like, that means nothing, right? But but when you're in school is everything, and you put so much weight on it, and it seems like the world puts so much weight on it. And I think that's important for people to see, people like yourself that have gone through that and can look back on it, because I'm sure there's so many people that are still stuck in that place that are feeling negative feelings just because of this stupid metric of high school. Like, it's so silly, right? Like,
I totally feel that. I never really liked education, but put so much of our value or worthiness based on just school. But they did it, right? If you weren't in the higher grades, like you just kind of got looked down on or whatever it was, or bullied, or just felt less yourself. Like I didn't want to share parts of myself because I didn't want to be wrong. If you were wrong, but that wasn't just in school. That multiplied in every area of my life. I didn't play sports whatsoever in school because I was embarrassed. For what reason? No idea. I'm a very athletic person outside school, but it took me so many years to actually realize that like I could be confident because of kind of the damage school did, as crazy as it is. But we were put basically in it and looked at like everything you do in school is how the rest of your life is going to work out.
And that's how everything's framed.
Is like, you got to do good. You got to be in school. You got to get the good grades. You got to show up and be nice and whatever it is. But it's like, it's such a small part of it.
Exactly.
And you don't really get to expand who you are or what you want, because you just have to take the regular classes. And if you're not good in those, or you don't want to go into healthcare or whatever it is, you're just, I don't know, they're like, best of luck. And they kind of just shove you out and give you nowhere to go, but they don't teach you kind of the other stuff.
And that's something that I have a real issue with, is that lack of exploring and to figure out what it is that you're going to be good at and what do you enjoy. And it's so much of, this is the path. This is what you need to do. If you need to learn these things, we're going to tell you exactly how to think, which is when you look at, like, if you take things back to before we had structured school systems, that is so antithetical to what teaching was. It was teaching you how to think, not teaching you what to think. Right. And that was always caveated by, school is just for the high school is going to be the cap of what anybody get. 99% of the population, that's what they're going to get to. So we're just going to make this very narrow to what you need to be successful if you never go on. And if you want to explore and go deeper than that, you're going to go off to university, right? But it used to be very, very small amount of people went to it, right? And now even that, universities have changed, and now they're not teaching you how to think, they're teaching you what to think, and it's getting worse and worse and more rigid, and it's becoming more like high school. And that was something that I was so frustrated with. I was just rage against the machine for 4 years in university, because I just thought I could see it everywhere. Just, you're brainwashing people. You're not teaching people how to think. You're not giving wisdom. You're enforcing knowledge, and very strict knowledge. Like, if you want to be this is the what you need to know, and don't dictate from it, don't question it. And it's a really dangerous thing. But when you get outside of it, you can look back and go, oh, that was silly. But when you're in that high school environment, or that junior high, wherever it is, from K to 12, you don't have any of that further out knowledge to look back and to realize, oh, this is just high school, right? And I feel like when I remember back, there were so many people that said, like, oh, don't worry about it, it's just high school. Like, there's so much more to it. And you can say it, but it just doesn't have an impact, because the way it feels is, no, this is everything. Like, I know you say this is just high school, but this feels like everything. Like, I know, like, oh, stupid old people, what do they know, kind of thing. Like, oh.
And now they were definitely all right. I think some of the most unique, smart people are the people that I've met that were homeschooled. And before, people would always be like, oh, they're weirdos, whatever it is. But I have met some of the most unique people. I had this friend, all his family, his siblings, I think he had like 6 siblings, they were all homeschooled, and his dad was a principal. Makes you really wonder, like, why the principal would not have their kids. Those kids have went up to be absolute geniuses, and things that I feel like, yes, education matters, but things that matter. They can now manage themselves in this real world with reasonable, I don't know, just a mindset, like they can think for themselves. And some of them have went to actually like challenge their diplomas, things like that, and been able to pass because they've taught themselves. But now learning isn't boring. And lots of people get out of school and they're like, I don't want to learn. Learning is unbelievable, and we should never stop learning. But when we're in school for 12 years we learn to hate it, and it's the worst thing. It's the last thing we want to do. So it kind of ruins it after.
Exactly.
Rather than just having people be able to explore, choose their classes, or if they excel in one area, open the doors and push them into those areas.
Right. And for people to be on the lookout for that and to look for those people that have that creative spark and see, and I think this is also a metric of just scale. And in high school, you have, 35 kids in your class, and it's tough to put that on a teacher to be on the lookout for those people. And there are those teachers. I'm sure we could both name a few teachers that really were trying their best to be that and to look out and to try and guide people into it. But on the whole, that's going to be the exception rather than the rule. Most teachers probably just like, holy shit, I have to keep control of these crazy little demons, 35 of them jam packed in this classroom and not leave that space. And then again, I go back to that's where university used to be, where you would have a personal connection with your professor, and they would be able to, where if the subject matter really gripped you, you could go and you could have conversations after, which you still can in university. They have office hours and stuff. But when you're in a lecture hall of 250 people learning about this subject, right, which a lot of your first years are, it's a different dynamic. There's not that person that, if you have a real spark for it, unless you go really out of your way, there's not going to be those professors that are going to notice that in you and help guide you and maybe put you onto a different path, like you're saying, which I think is probably the most important part of it. And that's, if anyone listening to this podcast get anything out of it, of like, if you're in high school age, like, you need to really understand what university is going to be. And it's still an amazing experience. And I had so much fun in it, but you need to understand that it's going to be what you make it. It's not going to be, you walk down and you're just going to have all this stuff given to you. If you just walk that really strict path of, getting from A to B, it's not going to be all that's promised. And you need to realize that going in and then make that question, is that really for me? Right? Like, if you want to be an engineer, you probably have to go to university. It's going to be tough to freelance your way into being an engineer, right? There's a lot of learning, there's a lot of knowledge, but if you want to be a writer, if you want to do that, like, if anything creative, you might be worse off going to try and go through that traditional path of trying to get there through school. It might put you further behind than you would be just trying to figure it out on your own, which I don't think enough people talk about. And there's probably only, a very small amount of degrees that are actually, people should be going into them in this day of age with the internet at your fingertips, with, how much is available to you. I would say probably 75% of people with what they want to do, or if they're, and then also, I guess, if you're unsure what you want to do, which is a lot of people as well. But yeah, I just think we push way too many people down this path of, you have to go to school, everything relies on your grades, because you have to get into university, and university is everything to you. If you don't get that, you're going to be a bum on the street. And it's like, no, that is not, it hasn't been that way for a long time. And, there's a lot of money to be made by people pushing people down that path. It's like, I wonder if this is, the best thing for them, or if this is just what's been done. And people just kind of fall into that.
Yeah. Now, something, I don't know if this will be like too out of there, conspiracy.
No, I'd love to hear it.
I'm a conspiracy theorist, I guess they say, but
everybody is these days.
Everybody is these days, my goodness. But they say that the education system came from the Industrial Revolution when businesses came. So someone created the education system to create workers and to people to sit from 9 to 5
and to not question.
And to not question. And to just learn something and not think for themselves, which I think some people, and it's sad to see them stuck in university, that still just follow and abide by the book. They don't think that experience is as important as what the book says, and like getting that learning. And they just went through. So it's interesting to see how the education system is still running that exact same way from many years ago to create workers. And I feel like now more days people are really waking up to that, or at least getting to the point and questioning. They're like, this isn't quite all that it is meant to be promised, like they said. So
yeah, no, and I think what I hate about the term conspiracy theory is that it's so all-encompassing, because to me, that's not even conspiracy. That is completely backed up. There's paper trails and everything to back that up. That is not even conspiracy. That is proven. That is exactly how it started. Doesn't mean that it hasn't evolved over time and stuff. But if you step back and look at it, it seems like it still is that way, right? In high school, of we're trying to teach people, or what to think, not how to think, right? Which is antithetical to what education should be at its best, right? But it serves people, right? And then what it used to be was, okay, now those people that were just people like myself that just, I question everything. I buck back against everything. I never take what's, given. And I, was in high school, I think some teachers probably didn't like it. I was, a bit, I wasn't bad, but I definitely didn't fit in that box. And I would push back against it. I think a lot of times that's what university was only for those people that really went, and then you could go out and question it in the university, and that was the place for it. But now, so many more people are going there, and this might get into more conspiracy, but it seems like they realize like, oh, that's kind of dangerous to this whole dynamic of building workers. And now they have these institutions that are bringing out free thinkers. And over the last 20 to 30 years, they've now captured the universities, which used to be the free thinker factory, and they've now cut that rate. It's the exact same as high school, where it's we're telling you what to think. There's no, a college campus is the most myopic one brain. Like if you deviate even a step, you get so ridiculed. And I got to see it, and I was that person. After my first year of university, I was that social justice warrior. I came back to Slave Lake and I was giving people shit for saying you can't say that word. And I was that person. I got to see it. And then over that summer, I was like, this isn't me. I don't like this. This is, it's in the spirit of being good to people, but this is causing harm. I can see the hurt in people's eyes and say, I'm not a bad person. I'm making jokes. Like, why are you putting this on me? Like, we know each other. Why are you doing this? I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel good. This is not as moral as it's all cracked out to me and it's showing up. No, you have the moral high ground. It didn't feel that way. And then I got to realize, and then I went back to university for the second, third, and fourth year and kind of looked at it. I was like, and then I had a really, cynical look at it of just, hey, I know you guys are all saying you all have the moral high ground, and this one way of thinking, this rigid of no deviation from it, is okay because we're right. It's like, I don't know. Like out in the real world, when I just had a taste of it, it doesn't seem that way. And then now graduating, go out, I was like, oh man, I was on the right path. Like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like I'm so glad I went down a different path. And I was actually having drinks with a guy named Brennan, who has been on the podcast a couple of times. And he was one of the ones that, and I told him this last night, like I was completely on that path. I was so social justice warrior, and I was within, the LHSA, which was the Lister Hall Students Association. I was an FC at the end of the year. I was ready to go back to it. And that is like, they were the ones a lot of time pushing this dynamic at the behest of the university, but it was really creating it. And I was going down that path. And at the end of that first year, him and another guy sat me down at a bar and just said, like, that's not you. You're going to go in, you're going to do this other thing. And there's that dodgeball league in Lister that I'm sure you've heard about. Any of your friends that went there that everyone's crazy about, and they got me to run that instead, which seems like such a small little thing when you look at it, but it was on the grand scale. That's what snapped me out of it. And I was forced to kind of live in the real world of that, because you had employees and you had, things you need to do. And you can't just run on, unicorn farts and rainbows. Like you have to be actual structure. And that completely changed me and put me down a completely different path. And I'm so thankful for it. Like every time I see him, I thank him for that, because it was such a small decision, but I'm so glad he did it. I'm so happy with how I like to think that I would have woke up to it eventually and come around more to who I am, because I think that's just innately who I am. And I question things I never would have been able to just take at, their behest, what I should be and how I should think. That never would have been me, but it probably would have taken me a lot longer to wake up to it. And it's just crazy to me, right? And I don't think that's a conspiracy theory, because I got to go and see it with my own eyes. Like I think that is pretty true, and that's where I want to warn people. Like, university is still an amazing place, and you can still do amazing things, but you need to go into it knowing what it's going to be, so that when you see those things, you can push back and you can make a judgment for yourself. Do I want to follow this, what they're telling me I have to follow, or does that not seem right to me? I can make my own decisions, which is what I'm all about, is just allow people to make their own decisions. And anytime I see things or structures that don't allow that and say there's only one way to think, which I think in the last couple of years, it has really, really gotten down that path. Yeah. And, I was prepared for it because I got to see it in university. This was, the last couple of years and a lot of the COVID stuff. I know a lot of people don't like to talk about that, but I was so prepared for that, because I was like, oh, I got to see this for years in university. This is the same playbook of, don't dictate your thinking. There's one truth, follow the science, all this stuff. It's like, don't question anything. It's like, oh no, I've been there before, and I saw the consequences of walking down that path. And, it was pretty interesting. And, I just worry, because now so many people don't realize that, and now go out into the workforce, and they're in these businesses and companies, or in education, teaching the next group of kids. And it's like, oh man, this is a really bad feedback loop.
Just a loop.
It's a loop.
They only teach you what they want you to know. So everything outside that, if you question, you're wrong. So then you don't question. Yeah. You just believe what they're teaching you. But there's a whole other side to like what they're teaching you, which is so crazy, and they don't really think about that. Another thing, they don't really give you the actual like experiences you should. I truly think education's one thing, but the actual like hands-on experience of doing that is a total other thing. Like they can put you through and you may know by the book, but then actually go out there and like have to put yourself through that. You have to be confident. You have to be a leader. They don't teach you all those like decent human things. They teach you how to just spit out knowledge from the book.
They give you knowledge, not wisdom.
They give you knowledge and not wisdom, and how to like show up differently or get that real human experience that like comes out and actually can make those shifts. They're just producing the same thing. People who know knowledge.
And I think that goes really nicely back to what you're talking about with homeschooling, because that was always my knock on it is the actual schooling inside of high school is, I think, problematic, which is problematic is a problematic word these days, but I think there's issues with it. But within high school, I got to learn so much that I was a very gregarious person. I was, loud and obnoxious, and I learned some of those things of how you have to act and when you can push things too far. And I really tested limits, and I learned a lot of those things that school should be teaching you, but I just learned it on the playground. It's not literally on the playground, but for the metaphor, you know what I mean, right? I learned it in between classes in the hallways and in the gym classes and those things. That's where I learned those lessons. And I think that was always my worry about homeschooling, because I would love to not, because my thought, I think a lot, I want kids really badly, and I always think about it, but I'm thinking, I don't know if I want to put them in school. I have some real issues with school, but homeschooling, they're going to miss out on all that, that socializing and that playground stuff that is really important. But I think that's lazy thinking, because sports, getting them in with group, like there's so much other ways for socialization to happen, and that's on the parents, and that's a lot of work, and that sounds scary to me, because like, holy man, raising kids is hard enough, and the traditional way of sending your kids to school is
an easier way. Like, I don't want to say that.
I know it feels bad, but like, and that's where I have to have, you have compassion for how hard it is to raise kids.
Totally.
Like, it is the most difficult thing you can do in the world, is to try and raise a reasonable human being that isn't a psychopath. Like, that is just borderline impossible. It's amazing that people do it. So you cannot blame them or hold any less esteem for them to take that easier route of just sending them to school, right? Yeah. And then when you add on top of that the layer of, if you want to do homeschooling right, it's not just homeschooling, it's homeschooling plus all those other things you need to do. But if you can do it right, I can't agree with you more. Like, if you really wanted to just make your whole world about giving that kid the best fighting chance going out into a really difficult world that's going to kick you in the teeth all the time, that is the best way to do it. I agree. And I think it gets more and more like that because of that feedback loop we talked about. I think that's more important each and every year. Is it's only getting worse. It's not really getting better. And I think, like you say, more people are starting to wake up to that. And I hope that inspires me and fills me with hope that maybe there's a sea change coming, and maybe we kind of are starting to wake up for that. And was a big piece of, wanting to do this podcast and to talk about things like this, because I want to be part of that solution of helping people realize that. And hopefully, if one person decides to homeschool a kid and to take that task on out of this, then I've done my job, because that's what I can do. And hopefully it ends up being more than that, and I can grow this to a point where I have a larger impact. But even if it's one person, that's important, because that I think that is way too important. And it's almost breaks my heart to see people not realize. It's another one of those things where it seems so obvious to me. It's frustrating. Like, how can people not see this? But it's tough. It's
because it's tough to see the things, and it's easier where they say like ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is just ignorance. Yeah. And you're not helping the problem kind of thing. But it's easier. Like, I don't know. I see even some young friends that are parents now, and I'm like, holy shit, like, kudos to you. Like, myself, I'm like, do I want kids? Do I not? But then looking at them like, what can I do now? So if I do choose to have kids, I can bring them the absolutely beautiful life. And that's so I'm working for myself. I'm not having to like miss out on things. I have the time, I have the financial support and everything to be able to give them that best situation while also trying to like help others do the exact same things. And the sooner we realize this, the sooner we can make the change, because nobody wants to be 30 or 40 and be like, oh my God, it's a lot harder to change that than like your early 20s or later 20s or whatever it is.
And that was, just for me personally, that was a huge piece of my decision making in the last 2 or 3 years, was seeing how quickly I was being sucked down that road of like this big job with a lot of responsibilities, and just almost daily it was becoming harder and harder. If I ever want to make this leap and go do something creative on my own, to be exactly. And that was a big part of the reasoning was I want to be there for my kids and not have to, work a 12-hour day and if things go wrong, and that's always going to happen. There's whether you're doing something for yourself or for someone else, there's going to be those. But if you try and structure it so that you have to give it the best chance to give them as much as you can, I knew that if I waited a couple more years, there would be no way I could, right? Or if I started now I'm having a kid. No, I need to have this set up and built up to at least a degree where I can have some sort of modicum of success with it before I have kids, right? Because once you do that those responsibilities you think you have now, have a kid, and it is, it multiplied by 10, right? And I recognize that, and that was a huge motivator for me to make that leap, which was terrifying, still is terrifying. It's, not the funnest, if I'm honest with people, it's not, the most fun. It's endlessly fun and not the most fun at the same time. It's a real, what's that word? Enigma. That's not the word I wanted, but it's close enough. But yeah, no, it's, that is right. And I think that's something that more people need to realize, of kind of taking stock of where their life is going and where they want their life to be, and then seeing, am I on the right track for that? And if I keep going on this path, where's it going to bring me? And with what I want in the future, how does that line up? Right?
Yeah, totally. Like people want the decent money, the happy family, this and that. But it's like, okay, now look back to like, is that going to get you that? Or is that going to get you where you're like living for your weekends with your family or after school? And people see the 20s as like, you got to grind through school, get that university job. And my entrepreneurial mind now, I'm like, well, I might as well, I don't know if I could swear on this, but fuck up as much as I can in my 20s and 100%. Try out a billion different things that aren't like that career idea. Because it does seem easier. When I worked with the last job, Cutco, I was like, oh, I'm a district manager. That sounded awesome for my ego. Yeah. It sounded like a career adult job. Yeah. Rather than being like, I'm an entrepreneur, I sell a couple different things, and like, I'm still figuring it out. Yeah. But it's like, it's the same thing. I know I'm going to get to the same point as people that are still in school going for that doctor job. I'm going to get to the same point. Mine's just going to be not straightforward and given to me, but I'm still going to kind of get there at the same time. But it's like that end goal. What one is really going to be what I want? Right. And looking at things through your own value system, which is so hard to do, because when you mention that about the title, that's something I've been struggling with a ton lately, like every day, is right out of university at 23 years old, I had this big title. I was general manager. I had 60 employees. I had, all these things, and none of that really meant much to me. I was proud of it to a degree, but it was more of the title, right? Yeah, like, when you get to say that to someone, you're like, oh, I'm this, and they're like, oh, like,
because society values that, right? And totally. But I didn't value it, but I valued it because society valued it. But I hate that in general. But it's still so hard. And now, what I'm doing now, doing this, is like with my personal value system, it's not even comparable how much more proud I am personally of what I'm doing now versus what I was doing before. But because society doesn't value it, I feel like a piece of shit, because I'm feeling like, oh, I've moved so much far back. People think I'm just a loser. Like when people ask me what I do, I'm almost embarrassed. I'm like, like I used to be this. Yeah. I feel like a failure, but it's like, that's society. Like that when I ask, if I really get quiet and ask myself, that's not true at all. But for some reason, I still feel all the negative impact of it, which and it's so funny, because like intellectually, I know that makes no sense. You don't care about what's society. You never have. Why does this impact you? Why do you feel so shitty? But you still do, which is so, I think that's good to talk about, because I feel like people don't realize that, like, even if once you do take the leap and you think you're doing that, it's that societal programming of what those values are is really, really hard to strip away. And I'm still working on it. I'm trying to remind myself that. And then, it's easy. The feedback loops of positivity or negativity, when those negative thoughts start to come, it's hard to get out of it. But like, no, I've been struggling with that heavy lately. I totally feel that. And it's interesting how a label of work can kind of give us that confidence, or at least the confidence that we think others are seeing us differently, yet we really never know. And I kind of came to the realization, I went back to Slave Lake, and I don't go back often, like once every 6 months is like my goal. And when I do, I find I always have either like just a little like personality shift or awakening in myself of like, I either broke down or I just feel different going back. And this time when I went back, I just realized I didn't really see people. And I was like, oh, like when I leave now, people are interested in your life when you leave Slave Lake, because you're doing something different. They all can too. Yeah. They just chose not to, but people seem amazed at like, how did you move away? I'm like, well, I told my mom I was moving, but tried to place a couple interviews and moved under the stairs
in a closet under my friend's stairs.
Harry
I was
Potter
like,
style.
it wasn't easy. I was like, but it was better than what I was doing.
Right.
I was like, it was just the choice I made. But seeing it, going back and being like, oh, like people aren't here to like see me or talk to me or kind of fill my ego up and like, oh, what are you doing now? I was like, what am I doing everything for?
Yeah.
I was like, why am I doing this? Am I doing it for the reactions of others and like seeming more than I was then? Or am I really doing this for myself? And I'm like, you know what? People will always talk shit, but nobody really cares.
Yeah. Everyone's concerned about themselves.
They will all say shit about you, but at the end of the day, they don't really care. Like, they'll all say it, but it doesn't.
It's fun to
really
talk
matter.
shit. That's the other part.
It's fun to, right?
We all
Everybody
do.
will get together and talk shit, but do they really care what you're doing? No. Do they care if you're happy or if you're sad? Like, they may say that, but do they really?
Right.
So just like do you.
Yeah.
And if that's outside of like the norm and you're going to upset people and whatever it is, you don't owe anyone anything other than yourself.
Right.
So like.
And like that, the people that are going to talk shit, they don't care about you and you shouldn't care about them. But like, there are people that do care if you're happy or sad, and you have that circle of people, right? And those people matter, and you would care about what they think and they care about you. But those aren't the people talking shit about you.
Those aren't the ones talking shit.
Exactly. And those are the people that matter. And if somebody within that circle is talking shit, you know, either I have to take this to heart or this person maybe shouldn't be in my circle. Maybe they're not who I thought to me. And I think that's important. I think some people have a bad habit, myself included at times, of just, it's painful to think, oh, do they have a point there? Right? Like, oh shit. Like if someone I respect and I value and that I care about has something to say, and you know, sometimes you would hope that it wouldn't be in the form of talking shit. Sometimes it's them saying to you, hey, you know what? I think you're drinking too much. Or I think like sometimes it's easy to go, oh, well, maybe they're not a good person. They're maybe they do care. And that is that tough love. Right. And it's keeping that open to, if it is someone that you respect enough that their words do hit, because someone you don't really care about talk shit, it's kind of, whatever, who cares? It's not that person. But when someone that you respect does it, it feels different. And that's important. And you need to notice that feeling and to check in of, okay, have I misplaced them in my value structure, or is that someone I really need to look into? Right. And I think that's tough for people, but it's very important.
Yeah. And checking in and just seeing like, is this a person I want in my circle, or
am I doing something wrong?
Am I doing something wrong? Like to have that awareness. Because if someone gives you constructive criticism, it's not all just like, you don't just kick them all out. But that awareness of like, and sometimes it does take like getting frustrated and going and sitting and realizing and being like, okay, I'm in the wrong. And sometimes it takes blowing up into a fight and then going to sit and come back a week later. Shit, maybe there was something more there. Or sometimes it's months later. I think sometimes things that people have said to me echo in my mind like years, months later. But, oh, maybe I was right at the time. Like probably the biggest area this comes up is like through breakups of like things through a breakup of like things that I'm doing wrong, that in the moment it's easier to just say, oh no, they're a shitty person and they're just, this is hate and anger and part of the breakup. And then years later, oh no, what they were saying, I was exactly that person. And then like, I've come to realize that now. It's like, oh man, like shit. Like I have almost, luckily, I think a lot of the times I've worked through that, and the only reason I can see it is because I've now worked through that, completely separately. And then the words you think back on those words like, oh yeah, no, they were right. And I've worked through that now, and that allows you to see it. But if you haven't worked through it, I don't think you're going to see it. So it's still, and that's a natural evolutionary part of our brains. It's just like, well, that's painful. I'm going to block that away. We're amazing at compartmentalizing, right? Like, and people, I've said this a million times on the podcast, so apologize for people that have heard this before, but like, there's this thing called terror management theory where like humans are the only beings that can contemplate their own mortality. And because of that, we have developed evolutionary this amazing way to compartmentalize, because if we weren't able to compartmentalize the fact that we are all going to die one day, right? Like, it's not like a dog doesn't think that. They just, they just go on with life. But people, it gives us this crazy way to compartmentalize these really painful things. And there's so much more that comes with it. But I think that's, you can see like maybe not a 1-to-1 ratio of how much it goes to, but it's definitely not zero of how much you contemplate mortality and you're okay with that. And you work through those things to how much you can actually see yourself for who you are and see it accurately and not be able to, and I'm the king of this. So like anybody listen, like I am the worst at this, of like being able to, just rationalize away things and put things into boxes so that you don't have to deal with them because they're painful. That is an amazing skill that we have, and it makes sense evolutionarily why we have that. But
you're not doing yourself any favor. You're actually doing yourself a disservice by a lot of the time and sometimes you're not ready for it, right? Like there's so many traumas that I'm just so thankful I never had to go through, but like sexual traumas and abuse and all these things that oftentimes you're not doing yourself a disservice. It's too painful for you to deal with at that time. And that is for a later date to work through, but it all has to be worked through. If you want all those things you think you want in life, they're all going to be held back by what trauma you haven't worked through, which sucks. And it doesn't mean you have to work through it right now. Sometimes those traumas are too much, but you should be always working towards being the person that will eventually be able to sit with those things and work through it and get past them. Right?
Yeah. I heard something interesting, and it's like, you don't need to fix those part of yourself, but you need to go back and look at it from the perspective you're at now.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. They're like, you're not fixing yourself. You're just going at it from like the awareness you're in now. And maybe it was 5 years ago and you're like, oh, that was hard, but like I can just take it on and notice it was hard, move through it in any way, heal whatever it is.
And have compassion for yourself in that situation. That's my biggest thing. Like I talk about that. Again, this is another thing I talk about all the time on the podcast, but like going back and looking at things I'm not proud of. A lot of times it's like with breakups, that's a big one. And then also like stuff like traumas, like I have a lot of like body issues and like trauma from like a kid of like always, having this terrible body dysmorphia and all this stuff. And to feel embarrassed, like once you've kind of worked a bit, when you're trying to work through it, you can then look back on that person who you were then. Like when I do this oftentimes when I look back at who I was in university when I was running that dodgeball and I thought it was hot shit and all this stuff. And I'm just like, oh, my natural instinct is to go, ugh, like I'm so embarrassed of who I was. Like that's so awful. It makes me cringe to think about, but then to go, no, I loved that person like that. Like with the knowledge that Nick of, 2013 had, the life experiences of what he'd been through, the maturity level he had, he was doing the best he could. Right. Yes. And that's really tough to do because your natural instinct is to cringe about it. But it's the same thing with everything of just compassion, of just understanding you were doing the best you could at that time and to have compassion. It's so much easier to have compassion for other people sometimes than for yourself retroactively. But if you can force yourself to do it, it really helps. Right. And I feel like I still struggle with all those same issues, still struggle with the body stuff, but it's way less now. And I've come so far with it. I'm really proud of how far I've come with it. Doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean I still don't sit like this to try and tie my stomach all the time. And like stupid things that I know is silly, but like it comes a long way. And I found the biggest tool I have for that is to look backwards with compassion. And I think that's a good lesson for people because I think sometimes it's so terrifying and so painful to look back on certain things, but the easiest way to do it is to go at it with compassion, which is, again, I always get shit for saying microcosm because I say it too much on the podcast, but like, it's a microcosm for life of just anything that's painful to go in with compassion and you're going to have a good time, to put it in South Park terms,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a disservice when we're not going and looking at things with love or our old self. And I can't remember where I heard it, but just for like, healing kind of the childhood self and childhood traumas. We all have them. We were all children and as good as our parents were, they still fucked us up in some ways or things we went through. And looking back at myself as like a little child and I kind of look at myself as if I was that little child giving that compassion. You would never judge that. Nick can be like, you little fatty, like whatever it is, that just not be right. Or you wouldn't say that to like yourself if you were your little brother kind of thing. Cause sometimes we're like, I've always had that negative self-talk. But if that was your little sister or little brother, you wouldn't. Look at yourself like that. And there's little things I've done when like, I look back at little Jessie and I'm like, just like giving her a hug or whatever it is, or going back to that moment and just loving on them for, who they were. And you can't go wrong when you give compassion to your past selves or past memories or honestly anything.
Or anybody, anything, right? Like that's like, not again to go into the COVID stuff, but like, I feel like so many people are not approaching compassion from both sides, right? The people that are, maybe on the traditional narrative side, they look at these people like, they come out with no compassion. They just think of the worst of them. Like, they don't care about people. They want people to die. They're stupid. They're all these things. They don't care about compassion. And then on the other side, they come these, look at these sheep. They're so stupid. They just drink whatever's given to them. They're suckling on the teat. They're snowflakes. They're so, it's like neither side of that is coming at it with compassion. And when I look at it, I can look at both sides and I can go, look at the I don't know. I hate even saying right. I'm trying to think of things to not say right and left because that's so overplayed and so ridiculous. But like the traditional narrative, people are like, they're scared. They have these multi-billion-dollar media companies pumping fear into them and making them so scared for their life. Like yeah, they're going to cling to whatever makes them feel safe. And if this is the narrative that makes them feel safe, they're going to have feelings about that. And that's completely natural. That doesn't make them a bad person. That doesn't make them stupid. That doesn't make them weak. I can 100% understand how they got there, right? Yeah. And it doesn't mean I agree with it, but I understand how they got there, and I don't think of them as bad people, right? All I would request of them is to think with more compassion for the other side and to be open-minded. And then the exact same thing for the other side. Okay, so there's been countless times where the government and these institutions of power have abused that and has lied to people. There's paper trails, there's all these things, there's leaked emails coming out. Yeah, I can completely understand how they get so jaded to the side that they don't even want to listen to any even reasonable measures and all these things. I can totally understand how they get there, but they're not having compassion the other way. And that's all you can ask them. It's like, when you look at this leading with compassion, leading with love, which is, when I talk about how I'm just copying my favorite, but this is, Lex Friedman to a T. He's like one of my favorite podcasters. And he always talks about how love is the answer to everything and everything needs to be approached with love. And when you look at things through that dynamic, it really rings true on almost any subject. You can take that lens and apply it to anything, and you're going to be better off than if you didn't, right?
Totally.
Approaching things, because, most people are good people. There's very few sub 1% that aren't good people, really. And they've been through different things and learned different things that puts them so that it's not, they don't think the same way as you, but it doesn't mean they're bad, right? And I think that's so much of it. And I, even talking about like the school of like, when we were talking about teachers and how much issues I have with teaching in the school system, I try and look through that compassion lens. It's like, they have 35 little mutants in their classroom running around. Like, how are you supposed to, like, I have compassion for them of, that's a really tough job, right? And just always trying to, you're always going to instinctually going to the thing that you naturally feel, but then stop for a second, apply compassion to it, and then you're always pulling yourself back to the middle, because you're always going to jump to one side, and then compassion pulls you back to the middle. And that is just so helpful. I found in learning that the last couple of years, it has completely changed how I look at the world, and I found my ideas and how confident I can be in my ideas, and the insecurities I used to feel because I was just jumping down these roads and hoping that I'm right because that's how I feel, and not trying to see it from other sides. You get so much more secure in it of, no, I'm secure in how I feel on whatever subject it is. COVID's a tough one because it's touchy, but I feel very secure because I know deep down, I haven't just, drank the Kool-Aid of whatever one side. I've really tried to sit with one and see it from all angles. And I try and do that on everything. And it's because I know that, I have a lot of security that, not that I'm right, but that I've at least done the best that I can, and I haven't just jumped to what is easiest, right? It's okay. Everyone around me in my small town is on this side. I'm going to go to that side. Everybody in my university is on this side, and there's huge consequences to even question it. It's easier. I have compassion for that. Who am I to ask you to be the warrior to stand up against the mob? Like, I can do that. I have been doing that. I've been doing that since this podcast started. I've been saying exactly what I think and being quite open about, the sources where I got it from, and that I don't stand to show, but that's me. And I've always been that person, but I would never ask that of somebody else. Not everybody's that person. Some people hate conflict, and I kind of hate conflict too, but if I care about it, I'm willing to stand up. I'll die on that hill all day long, but you can't ask that of other people. That'd be pretty uncompassionate, right? Like it's an interesting thing.
And I find once I learned or heard everybody is doing the best with what they know, it kind of just took a lot of pressure off me to like want to put my opinion on everybody or like what I think is right or the knowledge I know and like believe is right. Because really, everybody has their own perspective of what is right. And we all live. And
we're all trying to do the best we can.
We're all trying to do the best we can. And just, I definitely found within COVID, I kind of fell into that because I had different views than other people. And I felt like, I believe health and that our body had the power to create itself, has the power to heal itself kind of thing. So I did find I got sucked into that opposite side of compassion though, and being like, oh, like they're sheep, they're this. And I'm like, wait, they think that is the best, safest option just as much as I do. Everybody just wants love and safety. Every single person, we're all just doing it in ways that like there's a loser in it. We're either winning something and others aren't, or they are and we're not. Same thing I think with like war, with my boyfriend being in the military. I don't understand war because I see it as everybody wants the same thing. They all want either land to trade on. They all want good things, whatever's on the land, all of it. We all want the same thing, but we're all thinking that we have to kill others to get it. When they want the same thing as us. So like if we all had compassion and understanding, it's easier said than it obviously is.
Exactly.
That's our choice that we have. We can't control what goes on in the world, but we can choose if we see it with compassion or the other way. And if we see it in kind of the negative way, that's our choice to suffer.
Right.
But if we choose to see it with love, we spread love, we probably bring more love to the situation,
for sure.
and we live in peace.
Yeah, exactly. And doing that same thing we just talked about of like looking at something that you maybe disagree with through a lens of compassion. I do the same thing with war, and like my rationalization that I've done trying to look at it through compassion is evolutionarily of like just to survive. War was an inevitability, and it was because for thousands of years evolution, it's so baked into us. It's amazing. The fact that we can two humans can sit in a room like this for a couple hours and not devolve into a big fist fight is amazing. Like it's absolutely a miracle, and we've come so far. And to know that, to have compassion of like peace is fighting against every evolutionary instinct we've had. Not directly. I think humans are a little bit different because there's this whole other scientific evolutionary idea of forever in the animal kingdom, it was kind of the toughest survived, right? And the toughest would be the leader, that big alpha, that alpha male dynamic of you can mistreat people, and as long as you hold your power, you can't. But that changed with not even with humans. This happened before humans. It happened with monkeys, because you got to see at a certain point, monkeys were smart enough where if there was one alpha monkey that was just a tyrant, was awful, would just rule with an iron fist. Thing that changed, monkeys were smart enough to go, oh, we don't really like this. 4 or 5 of them would grow up and take them down. So it changed the shift, but it's only been for a couple thousand years versus tens of thousands of years of evolution, where now we're starting to get it, but we're still fighting against that even deeper nature. But you have to find some of that, and that's where I look at things like war is, it is, it's awful when it breaks out to that, but you have to have compassion of like everyone's fighting against thousands of years of evolution, and the fact that we can have anything, I mean, that doesn't excuse anything, but it allows you to at least, because I think what I hear is people just say, I can't even understand more. And it's like, well, I don't agree with it and I don't like it, but I can understand it. And that brings you to a different place where now you can be more open to the idea of it, and you can be more accurate in your understanding of it. Because when you're in that place where I'm just going to write it right off, I can't even look at that, right?
Yeah.
But what helps you get from that place to the place where you can at least start to see the players and how it works is just looking at it through that lens, find some way you can rationalize compassion into that situation, and it brings you to a much better place where you can look at it more accurately, right?
Yeah. Totally.
And that's when we're talking about, leaving Slave Lake and seeing people enslaved, like I want to do that same thing of like, there's so many lenses of compassion. I can look at that for those people that are, because that was one of those places where I definitely lived in that place where I saw how amazing it was to get out of Slave Lake and to travel and all that. And I live in just, how can you, I was looking at like, how can you not see that? How can you not see how much more is out there? And then when you look at it, you go, okay, well, if you haven't, you don't know. You don't know what's out there. Right. Yeah. And that's where I always tell people, if you come from a small town, I would recommend moving away from it. Doesn't mean there's any harm in going back either, but just to know that now you're not just there because you don't know anything else. You've now seen a little bit, like 6 months even. Yeah. Not that big of a commitment, right? 6 months, go live in somewhere else, anywhere else, and see what's that like. So now when you go back, it's a choice. It's not just right. And I think that's a big piece of it, but it's easy to have compassion for them, because if you don't know what's out there, you don't know what you're missing. Right. Mm-hmm. And then also once I got past that point, and actually, it was funny when I was first starting the podcast, I was just kind of reaching out to some of the people that I was going to have on. I reached out to Mr. Fisk. I don't know if you ever had him. And we had some really great conversation. He's been on the podcast since, but early on, he just said, maybe I'd had a couple episodes out, maybe as the first couple, and I'd maybe talked in a way that he'd heard, and he just said, hey, I just want to give you, feel free to tell me to kick rocks. Like, I'm not your dad fucking, but here's something I just want to tell you. He just said, be careful of how you speak about Slave Lake, because it's a really amazing place, and it's given you a lot of who you are. And I was like, yeah, you're so right. Like that really impact. Like I think about that all the time. Yeah. And since then, every time I have someone on that has maybe moved away or maybe had a rough experience in Slave Lake, and even more personally, like someone like my sister who really got to expand on who she was and really grow into herself when she left, and like going to school in Edmonton was so amazing for her. Yeah. It's still like, when I look back on Slave Lake and all the things that it gave me and the person it gave me, and especially when I would go to the city and I would see a lot of the times, it really was a huge spotlight on it when I saw how men treated, well, I'm going to say boys treated girls, because they weren't fucking men. They were boys. And I was astounded. Not to say that Slave Lake guys treated, but there's at least a level of respect of just like how they talk to them, or like, if you did that in the pub in Slave Lake, you would get taken outside. Like, you just can't speak to women like that. And maybe that's antiquated.
I think we knew different guys. But
fair enough. And maybe that was just me. Maybe that was just like who I, and maybe I'm attributing, maybe that's more of my parents raising me in a certain way, then I'm treating it. But I always felt like it wasn't just my parents, because like half the time I grew up in the hockey rink and I had a bunch of different parents, you know, like the Millers were my parents and the Discovers were my parents. I had so many different parents, and they all in that community raised me to be that person that I was. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm probably in a much different position because I had the luck of the draw of who I was born to and who my parents were and who they surrounded me with to make sure that I was with that. Like that is all a lot of luck and, you know, privilege, which as much as that word has been completely bastardized in certain situations, right? That is privilege of like to understand that. But I think there is some beauty to slave life too, that like, you know, and I'm sure you would agree with
totally,
that, right? Like it's, you weren't saying that it wasn't. Yeah.
I wouldn't be the person I would. And I think that lots moving to the city, people can notice a small town person. I found like, they're like, oh, you're just different. I'm like, oh, thank goodness a small town. Like you just, it definitely like it's so much beauty to it, but you don't know what you don't know. So if you never leave, you don't know what else is out there, and you're just staying in what you were born into, which at least, get out 6 months, something. Like,
and that's just that's one of those lenses of compassion I look for of like, it seems crazy to me that people would just live their whole life there and never try anything else. But the compassionate lens of that is to look at, okay, there is so many amazing things. And if you don't know anything else and you can, you can look at the good things that are there, that doesn't seem that irrational when you look at it like that. Right. And with the experiences I have, and again, so lucky, so privileged that I got to travel a lot when I was growing up. My parents, you know, I got to see Europe and I got to see Mexico and all these different things. And you get to see so much of what's out there that you're not within that lens. And if someone doesn't have that privilege, that is a much more rational decision to just stick with what you know. And that is, and also on top of that, comfortability and what you know is again, evolutionarily exactly what we're attuned to. Right. And it's almost bucking that trend. And and I shouldn't say that because there's people that hopped on a boat and rode around the world, right? Like there always were those people within a community, but on the whole, probably 95 to 99% of people are more attuned to comfortability and staying and security, right? And there's all those responsibilities, like we talked, if you have a family and you have all these things and you have a job, like, or older parents that are sick, right? There's so many things that can hold you back from that. And then just, there's so many different ways you can look at it. But having said all that, I would still, on the whole, recommend going out and trying to see something else because you never know. Right. Yeah. That, you put it really well earlier. I'm trying to not butcher what you said, but, that, people are doing the best that they can with what they know. And then this is almost saying the same thing, just it's the same thing, but just worded differently, is the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Right. Like, sure. Like, if you went and polled 100 different people, the vectors of how bad the worst thing has ever happened to them would be all over the map. There are people that were abused and people like me that, you know, it was some, you know, weight comments and just had this amazing life. But humans evolutionarily we learn by pushing back against conflict and against suffering. That's kind of how we grow. So whatever the worst thing has happened to you, it falls into that slot, right? And it's almost the same concept of you only know what you know, but when you take those two things, it really helps you look at people differently because like I struggle with this a lot too. Is just like, when I feel my traumas or whatever, like I think, man, I'm like I could have been sold into, you know, I read this book growing up when I was probably too young to read this book. It was Memoirs of a Boy Soldier, someone in Sierra Leone that got like, they hooked him on drugs and got him into fighting. He's like 12 years old and he has an AK-47. He's fighting this war and just like went through this crazy life. And it's like, man, I almost didn't, for years after that, I would not even give myself any room to think of that I hadn't let, because I had an amazing compared to that. Right. Yeah. But then when I heard that thing about the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened, I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it gives you almost that, just like Aubrey Marcus gave me seeing him gave me the freedom to see all this different side of it. Hearing that gave me the freedom of like, oh yeah, everybody's like that. It doesn't matter if it's not as bad as the next person. It doesn't matter. It all, just the way we're built, it's going to be the worst thing that's happened to you is the worst thing that's happened to you. And that is not all, it is relative, but it's not at the same time, because it falls into that same slot within your head of what we need to push back against. And your brain is going to inflate it into what it needs to be to push back, to be that coal in the engine, that fire that makes you, motivates you and pushes you out into the world to accomplish great things. Right. It's an interesting concept. I almost feel like those two, people are doing the best that they know or the best that they can with what they know. And the worst thing that's happened to you is the worst thing that's happened to you. If like everyone could wake up and say those two mantras in the morning before they go out into their day, the world would be a much better place. You know what I mean? Like they're almost cliches, but they're important.
Yeah, I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
That the worst thing that's happened to you is the worst thing that's happened to you. But just, bringing so much compassion for like other people and what they're going through or what they, but also like bringing compassion for yourself within it all.
100%. That's the most, because if you can't do it for yourself, you can't do it for others.
No. And I think we get that backwards quite a bit in life. We're constantly trying to give more to others than we give to ourselves. Yeah. And we're all pouring from an empty cup. Yeah, lots of us are, or I listened to a podcast and it was a mother talking about how once she like split up from her relationship and her kids were old, she's like, who am I past being a mother?
Right.
And you're like, who are you past doing the deeds for others? Who are you other than being a girlfriend? Who are you other than being a teacher? Who are you other than being a student? Like, who are you kind of thing? And just really, coming back to like the relationship we have with ourselves is the most important. And I think that's something I try to share quite a bit on social media now, but also something I learned in my relationship, crazy enough, because I'm such an independent person. Like I didn't think I needed a relationship, but everything just worked right. But he leaves sometimes for 3 months and I'm alone. Right. Yeah. And he's like, you need to have a relationship with yourself the same way you would with me. Right. So on days when I'm like, oh, like I'm just missing that person. I'm like, what do I miss about it? Do I miss the compliments? Do I miss going out for the cute date? And I will do that for myself now. Yeah. So really looking at it of like, what relationship do I have with myself? Because if I don't have that, how can I expect that or want that for others? For sure. Yeah, that's a really powerful way to look. I feel like I've learned that lesson in other ways, but that's such a concrete way to look at it. An easy way to look at it. Yeah, exactly. Like, date yourself. Yeah, yeah. And I'm like, oh, I've never thought about that. Me neither. Like, okay. And that's something I kind of came to that realization a different way, but in the last probably 3 or 4 years, and I've talked about this a ton again, apologies to people that have heard this a million times, of like, I was always a super loving person. I think that's kind of just had like, my mom was just the biggest ball of love ever, still is to this day, but like just, so I'm a super loving person, love all these people. And I think I struggled as much as I thought because of that, I thought, oh, like there's no way I could love anymore. Like I love so hard, but because of that, I didn't realize how lacking I was. And then when I started to work on loving myself and working through some of those traumas where I was holding a lot of, not hatred is not the right word, but almost like embarrassment and shame. Shame's the word. That's where I had so much shame over, body image and, some of my natural tendencies of being lazy and all these things that make up who I am. And when I started working through them and to start to love those, and it's still tough because I think, societally, even though I've come to love how I operate and that I'll always find the easiest way to get through things to society that looks like laziness. But I love that about myself that, as I got through university into like the 3rd and 4th year, I realized, well, I'm lazy. I want to do this the easiest way. I don't have to go to class. I don't have to buy the textbooks. If I work really hard 3 days before a midterm and I can learn this all myself and I'll figure it out. Right. Like society that might not be valued, but I love that about myself. Like I'm proud of that. And I found that the love I was able to give grew so much, which I just never thought it could grow anymore. But as soon as I started to love myself, and I'm still working on that, it's a constant battle. I don't think I'll ever fully be there, but I'm always trying to get better at it. Yeah. What I could give was so much better, right? And it's that same thing you're talking about. It just through a different way of getting there, right? But I think you don't realize that, and I think it's tough because it's painful. To sit and work through those things is painful. So everyone kind of shies away from it. We want to just put it in that box away and somewhere deep in the back of your mind that you don't want to think about it. And you don't think that it's manifesting in the world. You don't think that it's holding you back until you start to work on it. And then you realize looking back, oh man, that was really holding me back. Right. There's so much, I think power to that. We don't realize that it is such importance because even you'll ask, like, if you genuinely ask someone, you're like, how are you feeling? They're like, good. You're like, no, how are you feeling? Yeah. Yeah. And they're like, oh, well, I don't want to get into it or I don't know. And I'm like, when's it a good time to know? Yeah. Like, it's only you. Your life is you. Like you show up every day from how you're feeling internally. Yeah. When is it good to like know how you're feeling, or are you just going to push through those? But it's so normalized. Right. We're never taught how to care for ourselves other than like maybe your parents teach you how to wash, brush your teeth kind of thing. But we're never taught that is the most important part. Because at the end of the day, we die with ourselves. Yeah. And that's what everything else feeds from. And everything else. And like, there's materialistic things. Yes. There's experiences. Yes. But if you can't like just be yourself in an empty space and like find joy or find happiness, you're like, yes, it is tough work. And I think that's the hardest part is like, nobody wants to go through the tough work.
Yeah.
No, nobody. Yeah. But like, it is sure as hell worth it once you do. And it gets harder and harder. So like, I kind of use that as a motivational, like, I gotta do this work sooner because I don't want to be 40 and go through it. It compounds.
It does.
That's a bigger scar there that you have to like kind of take care of, but going through it now and just like doing the work now. And lots of people don't have the time either, or don't think they have the time, or
you will rationalize anything to prevent you from actually have to go into that room and battle that monster. But like you say, the longer you leave it locked up, it's just going to grow and grow and grow, and you're going to have to fight it at some point. And everyone thinks it's almost like a shadow monster. It growls really loud. It's scary. And the biggest part is just opening the door and going in there, right? It's not actually going to hurt you. It can hurt you. Nothing can but it's so terrifying. But that's the biggest thing of just learning. And one of the biggest things that have helped me is once you start, it's a feedback loop, just like all those negative things. When you start to see of like, oh, that really sucked to sit and like think about the traumas of like, maybe family members mentioning, talking about my weight and me feeling all that, like that really sucks to sit with. But then when you see all the benefits and all the dividends it pays once you do sit with it, it's like, oh, that was awesome. Okay, what else can I do? And you start to get excited about it and you start to work towards, and then this is something I've talked about a lot again, but like almost when you get, again, this word is terrible, triggered, but when you get triggered by something really hurts you, it's like, oh, that used to be awful and that'd be a bad experience, but now it's almost exciting. It's like, oh man, that really hit a button there. There's something I need to work on. It's exciting because I know it's going to suck, but now I've seen over going through it a couple of times that the benefits on the other side are going to be so worth it. So it changes that dynamic. Is now it's not like, someone says something to you that really riles up that monster that's in that room back there, and you can hear, scared. It's like, oh shit, I didn't even know that monster was there. I'm going to go fight it because I know, I'm going to be that strong person. It's the hero's journey of going into the cave, slaying the monster, coming back, right? Like it's the story as old as time. That's like the story that every other story is based off of, but it's there for a reason because it's really impactful and it manifests in all these different ways. Yeah. And you can start to change that dynamic where it's not scary anymore. It's exciting, which is, no, it's always scary. I shouldn't say it. It's always scary. It always sucks, but it's going to be worth it.
Yeah. You can see kind of the light on the other side of it. And, there was something I wanted to go off of there that you had said.
Happens to me all the time. That's why I got a notebook here.
Yeah. What was it? I can't.
Leaving it makes it bigger. Seeing the benefits. If you haven't seen the benefits, it's hard to, you'll rationalize things away. Trying to think. Now I'm trying to even remember what I just said. That's the tough thing about this. I feel like when you start doing these podcasts, you get so locked in. You're such in a flow. As soon as it ends, I have no idea what I said. It's almost like you black out for 3 hours and you talk, and then I'm like, people are like, oh, I love that episode. I'm like, oh, that's great. I couldn't tell you a thing we talked about. I have no idea.
So in it and ideas flowing. And yeah, definitely. No, it's about the kind of pains and stuff we feel. Maybe it'll come back.
It'll come back to you at some point. Yeah. If at any point it comes back to you and I'm talking, just say, it came back to me, which is always a really fun part of it too, is when it does jump back to you like that. Yeah. And I think it's important to, because of how hard it is for people that haven't seen the light of it. Did it come to you?
Yes, exactly.
All right, go ahead.
The triggers. If anybody's into because I know so many people, they're like, or my boyfriend specifically, I'm in a personal development. He's like, I don't know where to start. I'm like, I never thought about that. Triggers. If something triggers you, so many people see it as an excuse of like something's wrong with that person. Yeah. And that has helped me so much, is seeing certain things people say as a trigger and me instantly and myself being like, why do I feel uncomfortable? I'm remembering this and taking it home. And something my friends would say, they would be like, oh, I just want to walk into a room and like have heads turn. Like, I want to be confident. I want to be a powerful woman. And I couldn't actually even say that out loud without being like, like I felt so uncomfortable and triggered by that until I realized, I'm like, why? And I tried to say it out and I couldn't. I was like, ew. And I cried and I was like, I got to resolve something here. And it was like, why can't I feel that I want to be a confident woman? And it goes so far back and like figuring that out. But there's, just noticing a trigger and being like, wait, this isn't that other person. Triggers are triggering something in you for a reason and it needs to be delve deep. Like if someone says something or dances and you're like, oh, I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Because you don't think it's right for you to do that.
Yeah.
Like, then work on it. And I think it's such an easy place to start because everybody has triggers, but I don't think we see them as like a spot to really delve into. And you just see it, take time and sit with yourself. And lots of times that's where it gets tough is because then we have our phone and we go on Instagram, but phone in the other room, have a journal, sit with yourself and
I was just going to bring that up. That's
force
awesome.
yourself. Like, and that's, it's not easy, but like, that's literally all it takes is just being with our mind. And when you do that, you'll realize things do start to flow, whether it's tears or what.
Yeah. Something's going to flow.
Something's going to come. Because when's the last time someone sat there without their phone in the room, just them in their mind, no music, nothing. We don't, that's terrifying.
Yeah. That's meditation. That was the hugest thing that really kickstarted. I was kind of already on the trip, but that kicked it into, skipped third and fourth gear right into fifth. Like it was crazy when I started to do that of just sitting quietly and just seeing what came up. And so much came up. Like it was unbelievable to me. And even going through that and knowing that and seeing how much it helped me and how like it was good for my mental health. Yeah. How lazy I've been lately with meditation. Like I had, honestly, before this, right before you came over, I had the first really good meditation I've had in a while where I really got to that quiet place, and I hadn't had that for a long time, and I almost forgot because the last couple times I tried, I just couldn't quiet my mind up, and it was not, and then I was mad, like, oh, I just wasted 15 minutes because I didn't really get there, and just wasn't good. And just today, for whatever reason, maybe it's because I was excited that I had a podcast, which is always really good for my mental health when I can make one of these happen. I, did a run in the morning and I was in a good place and I just was able to get there. It was amazing. Like I just loved it. And I almost remembered like, oh, this is awesome. I need to do this more often. And when back when I was doing it every day consistently, I would never have those days. The only reason it was getting harder was because I hadn't done it in a couple months and I was been, depressed and not getting there and doing those things. And just to expand on what you're talking about of like, that idea of not knowing where to start. I've heard that from so many people because I talk about this. People oftentimes they say, I don't know where to start. And I always have a bunch of recommendations because I think one is talking to someone, like BetterHelp. They're not a sponsor yet, but like BetterHelp is just this online therapy service. You just download the app. You can text with someone. You can talk on the phone. You can do Zoom. They probably even have in person now. Like there's all these different areas. That is one really easy way to get started because it's just about getting started. That's the biggest thing. So if that sounds interesting, you can do that. Second one, journaling. I think, and I'm Hippocrates here because I do not journal ever, and I know I should, but I know it works for so many people, and that is one of those things that's a real trigger. If you just start talking, things will flow, right? Wow. Meditation is another one, and you kind of said it before I could even get to it, but like meditation is another. It's a easy little hack that will get you to that point. And then the fourth one would be triggers, right? Look for what hurts you, and those are all different ways to get started. And what's more important than any of those is just starting. However you do it, however you start. You need to start that feedback loop because you're going to, as soon as you start to see a positivity come out of it, it makes it so much easier to go back and do it again. Right. And if you never start, you'll never get that first little taste of it. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And those are all just little ways that I've found. And I'm sure there's tons more. And maybe I can ask you, do you think through, you've been on this path for a while, do you think there's any other ones that you found for yourself that kind of help facilitate those things to come up and to find areas that you need to do work?
I would say just another one. Breath work has been a big thing I've gotten to recently, and just I don't know.
Aubrey Marcus got me into that.
It's definitely good, and just doing little ones. And I've done longer ones that are more like you basically cry through a therapy session quietly, but you come out feeling like a totally different person. But even just like 5-minute breath work and just realizing how important our breath has been huge, and bringing me like back into our body. Just something we can do that like helps us feel in our body. And I think, breath work or meditation does that. Cause then it reminds you that like, you're more than just a person that has to accomplish things. You're like a person that matters, and your feelings and things like that. And
it's so important in so many different ways, like that breath work. I've been absolutely astounded probably in the last year and a half, 2 years. There's an awesome book called Breath by James Nestor that I read that was hugely impactful. Actually, James Nestor's been on Joe Rogan. If you don't like reading and you want to listen to a podcast, if you're more of a podcast person, you go listen to him on it, and he covers most of the stuff he talks about in the book. But the book is awesome too. And it's not that easy read. Anyway, getting too far down that. It's amazing to see how much physiological control we have over our bodies in different ways. And breathwork is one of those ones that just, you can do amazing. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Wim Hof at all, if you're into breathwork, like I am the biggest skeptic ever, and I have trouble with things like astrology, things like, spirituality. I've, for the longest time, I don't know if I was just growing up in Slave Lake and it was very logical and that, so I really started with it. And over the years, I've kind of opened up to it. But what married those two things a lot on one of these subjects was Wim Hof, and to see so much of this sounds like woo-woo bullshit. Like, what are you doing with your breath? But then they actually take him into university, they study him, they, all the different things he can do just during his breath, like change his core body temperature, bring it up, bring it down. He can, what did they do? I think they injected him with some sort of toxin, I can't remember, and he was able through breathwork to clear it. Like, and they have a study like where you're like, usually you'd get really sick and you'd like throw up or you'd shit your pants and stuff, and he's just able to breathwork and purge it from his body, which is absolutely, to a guy like me that's a skeptic, that's like, holy shit, that's impressive. And then they go, well, that's you've been doing this breathwork forever. So he says, all right, I'm going to come back in 2 weeks. So he takes, I can't remember if it was 20 or 50 people that weren't 20-year breathwork people, taught them and brought them through, and they were able to replicate what he was doing. And it's like, holy shit, that's impressive, right? And then on top of that, I'm super into MMA, like almost embarrassing. I just felt head over heels in the last couple of years for it. And to see these professional fighters that are always looking for the smallest little edge, they're trying to like dial in their nutrition, their training, their sleep, everything towards it. And they've they're so optimized. And then you see them add breath work into it, and the way they talk about it, like, okay, I do everything, and breath work just like blows those things out of the water, right? Like, it's amazing what it can do. And like now half of it's becoming more, I would say like every year from like 2016 to now, like another 2% of professional athletes have like breathwork coaches, which is really proof in the pudding for a guy like me that really holds a lot of value on sports. It's like, oh, well, if it works for them, probably could work for me too. Like, it's just breathwork is unbelievably important. I'm glad you brought that one up. That's a great one.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool to see different athletes and things incorporated. And we all have it. But even it was about a year ago now. My boyfriend was looking up the importance of breath and realized like nasal breathing while working out, not breathing through your nose. And I would get really bad like leg cramps and stuff. But if I would work out and just breathe through my nose, which isn't easy, like
it takes some time.
Time and practice, but I wouldn't get the pain. I could run so much longer. And sleeping, I'm a mouth breather, so as weird as it be, we'd tape our mouth and breathe through our nose, and I would have better sleep. I would wake up different. Like, there's so much power in it. We all do it, but it's like sometimes, I don't know, you can forget to even breathe. And then you realize you're like, how long have I been holding my breath for? Or to not breathe properly, but to think that, we can do the things that Wim Hof can do by just
anyone has that
at our breath.
Anyone has it at their fingertips. Yeah. And that breath by James Nestor, that was one of the biggest things. It was, they did a bunch of studies comparing nose breathing to mouth breathing, and it has tons of literature behind that. And that was one of the biggest things. So I did the same thing. I've gotten really lazy with it now, but I did, the mouth taping at night. I really worked at just being conscious of nose breathing all the time. I would try and do my runs. Only nose breathing. Again, I've gotten super lazy with it, and I need
and
having this conversation.
Changes
it was amazing. It was hugely impactful. And not only that, but my mental health I found was like different. Like, it was I can't explain exactly what it was, but it was definitely a noticeable increase for how I felt, which looking back now and what I've been going through lately, it's like, man, that is such a small change I can make. And I'm just kind of kicking myself in the ass right now mentally. I'm like, man, you're being lazy. You should be getting back on that but almost it's so funny to go through something, have it be that impactful to me, and then
forget about it.
You forget all about it until this conversation. I'm like, man, that was really amazing. Like, I was all in on that. And I was telling everyone that we could listen about nose breathing. And my whole probably my family doesn't want to hear nose breathing one more time. I bugged them all about it so many times, but like, it was so impactful. And then I just forget all about it. Same with like the meditation. I know that was like a life raft when I needed it the most. Like, it was so impactful to my life. And then I just get lazy and you fall off of it. Like, humans are an amazing human being. And I think that goes back to that thing about just this ability to compartmentalize, where I'm going through pain. I just want to be lazy right now. We can conveniently forget all the things we need to just to fit whatever we think we want right now, and to what's going to make me, it's comfortability of just like that kind of whatever's going to make me feel comfortable and safe, and just put that big cozy blanket on and not deal with my shit. Right. It's amazing. We
all go back to kind of like that emotional comfort and whatever that is until we like train it to be something different.
Exactly.
And we go back, and comfort kills.
Yeah. And that's, and not to bring it back to fighting, but that's one of those things where you see in cage fighting is everyone has kind of something that they came up with. Sometimes people are like a striker and or sometimes guys come up in wrestling and you see when things get difficult, they always go back to what that base is, right? Like if they're in a fight and stand up and they got kind of cracked and they're a little bit wobbly, if you're a wrestler, you're going to go back to your wrestling. If you're a striker, you're going to just start swinging. Like it's amazing what you see that. And you just see the manifestation of that same idea in everything. And that's life. When life gets tough, you go back to what's comfortable. Yeah. And so much of the time, and that's where I was trying to go with that, is so much of the time you hear fighters talk about fighting that instinct, because you shouldn't go back. You should, when something goes wrong in a fight, you need to do exactly what you need to do. That's the smartest move. Yeah. Sometimes going to wrestle is the worst thing you can do. And right. Or sometimes, just swinging punches when you're wobbled is not the smartest thing you can do. Yeah. And they talk about having to drill into themselves to fight that instinct, to keep conscious when things go wrong, not to just go to what's comfortable, go to still keep conscious of what is the best move I need to be making in that moment, and how hard that is. Even these guys that have been doing it for 20 years, that instinct is just so deep. It's so hard to fight. And I think that's everybody, right? Like that's just, again, a microcosm of bigger things, right? Yeah. My favorite word in the world.
I think literally like it's going to be an ongoing battle, because you even listen to people that have been meditating forever and they'll still be like, it's so hard some days. And I find our body, wants comfort, and what's best for us necessarily isn't comfortable. Yeah. And Jay Shetty has in his book, he talks about, and on his podcast, he talks about being on like this long train in India, and they meditate on their breaks, and they only have breaks every so often kind of thing. It was chaotic. And he's like, I'm going to meditate, but I'll wait for the break to meditate. So when I'm off the train, it's not as chaotic. And he's like, do you think life is going to be chaotic like the train or slow like the stop?
Yeah.
And he's like, it's going to be chaotic. So you need to learn to do these in the chaos.
Yeah.
Because if you wait for the slow times, you're going to be putting it off tomorrow forever. And when it gets there, you're going to want to enjoy the slow times. So you're not going to want to do it. Yeah. So, and I love that point. I was like, life is always chaotic, but how can you at least be aware of like what your comfort is and what you want your comfort to be, or like that maybe it's not comfortable, but just like that other option. So you can be aware to not sulk back into the comfort. And
And so much of that is like about always being conscious of, is something serving me? And again, this is one of those things I talk about a lot of, like, so nothing is ever really 100% good or bad. It's different times call for different things, right? Like everyone says, like, society looks at anger as kind of a thing that's almost a negative, and you should try and not be an angry person. But there's times, if you need to protect your family, sometimes anger is what you need, right? It's just in that moment, is it serving you, right? Sometimes comfortability is what you need, and is it serving you? But a lot of times it's not. And it's not falling into just going with your feelings of staying conscious in your head and saying in that moment, to be able to ask yourself, is this serving me right now? Right. And to always ask that about everything. And I think a lot of times it's just easier not to. So again, you don't, but I think that's super important in so many different realms. It's just to keep asking yourself that question.
Yeah. Yeah. And having the mindfulness, and it kind of goes back to the things you listed where it's like breathwork, meditation, journaling. Like if you don't do those, you can't expect yourself to be mindful in those times, because it's such a practice. And another thing I've heard from meditation, they're like, lots of times take it as like, if you're frustrated or like your mind's all over the place, what you need comes to you in that meditation. So they're like, sometimes if you're all over the place, just know that as this is a day you're probably not going to have to sit still and try to get some work done. Yeah. Or if you fall asleep in your meditation, the meditation knows you need rest. Yeah. So that's what you need. So it's like, so I looked at my meditations. I'm like, like today wasn't as good, but what am I comparing it to? Right. A past meditation. Right. That's giving it expectation. So like if you wipe that, it's the idea that you just sit down. What comes to you in that is like what you need. And if it's flustered, like today, give yourself some grace, give yourself some compassion kind of thing. And it kind of just helps rather than, kind of judging that, but knowing that like meditation is impactful for everyone. Cause even if your mind wanders, you're still doing it.
And it's going to wander. Like to go in with the expectation that's not is what holds 99% of people back of like, I've tried it before. I couldn't do it. Yeah. It's like, no, you were doing it. That's what it is. Right. Yeah. Like, and that's so hard to explain to people of like what that is. And that it's like you say, if someone's been doing it for 20 years, they're still going to have those times where it doesn't. But talking about, what you need comes up in a meditation. Like I was blown away with that of like, sometimes it'd be like a really big problem at work where I just couldn't think through it. And then I'd be meditating and just out of nowhere, a solution would just pop into my head, like out of the ether. And I'm like, that's what that's what I got to do. Right. And at the start it was tough because I was thinking like, I need to be empty my mind, but then to be able to drop that. And when you think like, oh, that is awesome. And I can do that. And I can do that. Oh, that's amazing. I kind of figure, okay, let's remember that. And now let's go back to like whatever, saying the mantra or concentrate on the breath, whatever type of meditation you're doing, whatever you need to get back into that. But I wouldn't even let those, even if there were good thoughts that like I needed to think of, I was so locked into that rigidness of like meditation, of like, no, I'm not supposed to be thinking things. Right. And like, and that just came with time of losing the expectation. Like you talk about the expectations falling off. It's just going to be what it's going to be. Every meditation is going to be different. Sometimes you're going to be just, in that floaty space the whole time or not anything. Sometimes you're going to, solutions are coming up, and sometimes the things that you've been avoiding and distracting yourself with, like, just to be honest, like lately, I think I've been trying not to meditate, because every time I do, I start thinking of like what I'm going through right now with like breakup and like reasons why, and like, and every time it's really good things where I'm really like thinking of it in that space of just that meditative state, you really see things clearly, and like, yeah, I could have done that thing wrong. And like, yeah, I'm feeling bad about this because like, and you have a right to feel that way. Like, sure, that's not exactly logical, but this makes sense because of this and that. And like, it's painful. It's not all that fun. And I think that was something that was kind of holding me back, because again, you don't want to go through the pain, but it's important, right? And then like you need to just keep on it and do it. And you kind of got to force yourself. And now I think having a good meditation, like, and not even say that good meditation, not a lot of it was that, and that did come up a lot, even the meditation today, but I was able to not put expectations on it and not react and get emotional in the moment and kind of stay. It's like meditation is not like a thing. It's like a state. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like so many people want to understand it in a concrete way of like, okay, it's just having no thoughts. Yeah. But it's not even that. Like, you can have thoughts and like you can let them go. It's not being attached to them and just kind of letting things come and go. Like it's hard to explain to people, but when people do it, I'm sure like you'll understand kind of exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. Right?
And someone's explained it as like just watching the clouds. Yeah. Like you don't hold on to you just see it go by, or watching cars. They're like, there's a thought, don't get in, let it go by. Yeah. And then it just, being aware. And some things like, maybe in that meditation, it's you literally write down every single thing that comes up in your mind as quick as possible. Yeah. And then you realize once you get to like the list of your 5 things that have been repeating, then you get to the real shit. Right. And you're like, oh, okay, this has been in there a while. Or
so you've done some meditation, it sounds like. Yeah. When did you first, do you like remember the first time you ever tried it? Like, was it when you were younger? Was it more recent? Like, how did you get into it? What type of meditation did you try? I'm just curious how other people get into it.
I can't even remember the first time I've tried meditation. I've been into kind of stuff that would have brought up meditation for a long time, but I think I would always try it and never felt like I was getting there. Until I think like this past summer, honestly, I just kind of sat down and just little different YouTube videos, 5-minute ones kind of thing, or whatever it is. And I got in I was doing it with a girlfriend that we'd get up every morning, Zoom each other and do it. Yeah. Because other than that, like, consistency is not easy. So I was like, if someone else is going to do it.
Having a buddy.
And numerous days she'd be like, man, I wouldn't be here if you weren't. And I'm like, I wouldn't be here if you weren't today either. So like, good thing. And then we do it together. And I found just doing those consistently is when I felt that I didn't have the expectation. I was like, that 5 minutes of just like myself and just silence, and I really, really started to enjoy, and then just noticed a difference in just being able to bring myself back to that throughout the day of like, hey, like just calm presence, like my emotions weren't all over the place. And that's when I was like, whoa, this is really, really nice. That I finally started noticing, when people are like, oh, just meditate. And you're like, okay, for that 5 minutes, cool. But it's when I, noticed it in my everyday life of just the presence, the more awareness, being able to bring myself back. And I was like, oh, doing this for 5 days is the trick. Like the days, some days shitty meditation, but I still sat down and did it for 5 minutes and I just noticed the consecutiveness of it was like, gave me that feeling that was like, oh, this is worth it to like force myself to do. And now it's kind of a non-negotiable. Sometimes it's 1 minute and the minute seems like a long time, but I'm like, it's a minute for me. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I feel like that's exactly what it has to be, because as much as me and you can try all these different ways and metaphors and ways to explain what it is, it's ineffable. You can't explain it. So, and I think that's what's so troubling for people is they've heard all these different things and they go to do it and it doesn't sound like that because it's not, language is not there's no words to describe what it is. You almost just have to feel it. Right.
Yeah, totally.
And because of that, you almost just need to do it consistently enough where you can let those expectations fall away. If you do it for 2 weeks every day, you're just going to, you kind of realize, oh, this is what it is, right? Like whatever it is what it is, which sounds like a nothing statement that means nothing. It kind of does. Oh, such a weird thing to talk about. But like, and maybe that's what I would suggest to people of like, because people have asked about like, oh, I just can't do it. It's like, just consistently try it for 2 weeks with no expectations of just 5 minutes. And you may not completely get there, but you'll have a much better understanding of what all those metaphors and the way that people will talk about. You will understand those much better, and you'll be in a much better point to understand it. You'll just never fully get there. Yeah. It's an interesting thing, the old meditation. What about things like journaling? Because I feel like just through social media, I see you doing, and I guess I should expand that not to like journaling, but like gratitude practices. And you posted one recently. I don't know, it might have even been today. I'm forgetting what it was. It was not positive affirmations. It was like you had like things written and then like
limiting beliefs.
Limiting
belief exercise.
So like, how long have you been doing all those type of things? So those are all things that like maybe I've never done, but they're within the same vein of trying to like personal development.
Well, journaling, I've been journaling since grade 9.
So
I've been journaling for,
you're ahead of the game.
I've been journaling for a long time. And I honestly think that for just being, I was really depressed in high school. Like I was bullied and adds like also probably not like in high school, but so I read, my mom has books, but like doesn't read them herself kind of thing. So like she had The Secret and gave me that book. And I'm thankful I was as young as I was because I was almost naive. Like you hear something, you believe it is true, no matter how magical or false it sounds. So I was like, oh, of course I'll try this out. And then I was young enough that I believed full-heartedly in doing it.
Which is like, the requirement that you need.
Which is the requirement. But now we're such in a structure where like, I can't believe it till I see it. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Like you got to feel it and it shows up in your reality kind of thing, which sounds like whatever, but it is what it is. So I started really young, and just because she'd give me these books and I'd read it. So journaling was a huge part of my life then. And I think truly got me to where I'm at now. Because as soon as you write it down, it takes what's in your mind to reality. Other than that, it's just clutter in your head. But as soon as you write it down, you're like, whoa, that's either bullshit or that's powerful. So like even today in the limiting beliefs exercise, you write down your limiting belief, and certain things were like, even for this podcast, I don't know enough for people to even care to listen to this episode. And I'm like, oof, that doesn't sound very true. Cause like, they're like, why would that matter kind of thing? Scratch it off. And I'm like, my worthiness is not on how much I know kind of thing. Exactly. So just, you realize how true things are, how untrue they are as soon as you write it down. And then it brings,
or speak it out loud.
Like if people aren't journalers, just put your phone on record and play it, whether you're going to listen to it back or not. Speaking things out, like, and having that moment to yourself and your thoughts brings so much power to like awareness to it. So I've journaled forever, and gratitude has been just, I read, it's called The Magic, and it's a gratitude practice. And every day you wake up and read the little spot and write 10 things you're grateful for. And like, of course it's like kind of easy, but then it's like, why are you grateful for them? Like, what does that bring you? And there's so much power in that. From even sitting silently without your phone and being grateful for every piece of food on your plate, how it got there, who grew it, how it got into the store, how it was packaged, how it gets to you, how it was grown, and like
the soil and the nutrients that came from that, and all the things that had to die to give their
crying, eating, and you're like, fuck, best meal ever. But you're like, I've ate these meals daily 3 times a day and never been grateful like this.
Exactly.
And just bringing that in different ways. And I heard a podcast the other day that just kind of brought together everything I've been doing with gratitude. And they're like, we have manifestation wrong. We think that like it needs to show up and we'll be grateful for it. But instead, we need to feel the feeling that we'd feel if we had it.
Right.
And then it will show up in our reality. And like gratitude brings that. If you're not thankful for
and
the
visualization
things,
as well.
And visualization, totally. Like just really being thankful for like my house that I'm in now, even though it's not in BC. I wanted to live in St. Albert before, and being grateful for like every part of it, but feeling it. If you go into your day with that, you're going in with like love and happiness, but you're noticing different opportunities. You're not sulking. You're not negative. And it really changes everything, because you choose how you show up, whether it's love or anger. That's your choice. Show up with love and gratitude.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
shit
awesome.
changes.
Yeah. And I've heard so many people talk so eloquently, probably Aubrey's one of them, of gratitude practice and what that brings. Yeah, I definitely, for a while when I was meditating every day, I would try and end the meditation with maybe, I really like what you said, that expanded upon where I wasn't going, was just, I would try and name some things I was grateful for. But I really like that idea of not only pick these things you're grateful for, but then go down that rabbit hole, really push it past that surface level and go into why you're grateful. I don't think I ever did that. And that sounds really powerful.
Because lots of people, and that's where people get stuck with it. Like, people be like, oh, I am grateful. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like you freaking, it's a chore. Like, you said 3 things and you got it over with, but it needs to be like, you need to feel it, but make yourself believe it, kind of thing. And like, not lie to yourself.
Power of the mind.
Just power of the mind, like writing down certain things. Or something I used to journal when I was so unconfident. I wouldn't even go to the till to pay for my own things growing up because I was so scared.
Wow.
But I would write down that I am confident and I will be remembered, because I didn't think people would remember me either. Kind of, I don't know why. And I would write that down and like be crying because I was sad or whatever, but writing that down, I'm like, this will be true one day. And it's not just like a one-time thing you got to do. It is a practice. And it's one of those, like, when you don't feel good in the morning, but you write things of like why you're grateful for them and how you're grateful for them. And it just changes it. Like that second step of like, why? What does it make you feel? Why does that make you happy?
What does it bring to your life?
Yeah. Like, I could say I'm grateful for my boyfriend, but why?
Yeah.
Like, or I'm grateful for food over the roof of my head, but like, why? Really soak into like where you'd be without the roof over your head.
Yeah.
And like, as weird as it is, you gotta see like the contrast of what it would be without that to really sink into the gratitude of having that. Right.
And then it just changes the way you look at everything you have, right? Like, there's anybody that is in a situation where you live in abundance or you live scrapping day to day, you can do that same practice and you can change the way you look at what you have. It doesn't matter what you have. You can change the way you look at what, you may not be able to control the hand that you're dealt, but you can
control how you look at it.
Yeah, exactly.
And what you bring to it. And even if there's shitty days, you woke up.
Yeah.
You have breath.
Yeah.
You are here. Or like, there were certain practices of being really, really grateful for your health. And it's like, lots of times we're not grateful for our health until we don't have it.
Yeah.
So write down why you're grateful for your legs, why you're grateful for your hands.
Yeah.
And like, it was,
and think about what
things.
It feels like to be sick, to have a cold, and just that feeling of like, I would do anything to feel good. And then on the days where you feel pretty good, like,
you don't think about it.
You don't think about it at all. Right? Like, oh, this is so nice to not be stuffed up and not have like achy body or whatever it is.
We just expect everything to be great and then still want things to be like better. Even though we're not happy about what we have. And
but
like,
that's so natural.
It seems so backwards, but it's what we're just grown up in. Like, we're always expected, and it kind of goes back to learning of the ego. We're always expected to want more since we're a child. Even toys, like, you're going to get another one at Christmas. If you don't, you're like, where's my toys? Like, there's always going to be a new one. We're always taught to want more, want something different.
Right.
So it's ingrained in us from a young age to just want more, and continuously, rather than being like, I have my 3 toys. Like, I'd get more. Oh my goodness. Like, we need to. Yeah.
Which, and again, and to have compassion for that natural proclivity that's what allowed us to survive. That's evolution of like, you always want more because it's a hard scrabble. You think that drive to always want more it's not a bad thing, right? It's just, you have to ask yourself, is it serving you? Or would it serve you just to be grateful for what you have in that moment, right? And you kind of have to fight against your natural programming, that evolution that, it doesn't matter if you have an abundance of food, you could have a hard winter and then you won't, right? Like you need to always be kind of scrabbling for that moment. But now we're in a different time where maybe that doesn't serve you, that evolutionary programming that is going to take thousands and thousands of years to change. Doesn't mean you're going to change it, but you can at least try and do the practices. And this is a practice that helps you see if it's serving you. And if it's not, change that.
Yeah, totally. I love that. Like, if it's serving you or not, no.
Yeah. And that allows you to not put judgment on the things themselves, because nothing's ever good or bad or completely black or white. It's just,
is it serving you or not?
And in that moment, it could be serving you right now and it won't serve you in the future. Right. Like, yeah. And those gratitude practices, I feel like I struggle. And I know this is completely one of those rationalizations that I feel like I so deeply all the time, like I'm so blown away. And this is probably a big stoner thought, but like, I'm so blown away by how wild it is that like life and evolution and the fact that like just we happen to be on this planet that is a certain distance away from the sun that makes it habitable and all these different things, and let so many things can go wrong, asteroids, super volcanoes. Like I'm so blown away by just like how wild it is that we're even here, that like that astounds me. But because of that, I always think like I never go to the next level, because I feel like I'm always have like, oh, I'm a grateful person because I have such a good understanding of that, and that blows me away to such like a deep level that I know I resonate with that, of like it stops me from going further of just like the littler things like you're talking about. Like I'm grateful for a roof over my head, and why? Because I feel like in my own head it's almost like that's silly, because like more than that, like I always, when I try to be thankful for a little thing, I always just go back to the craziest one of like, I go all the way down to the bottom of the hole of like, this is all fucking crazy. Like the fact that we're just here, this is wild. But like that's silly, because when you lay it out how you did, and like going deeper into that is powerful too. But I find I struggle with those, because I always like, when I sit down to be grateful, I always just go right down to the bottom of like, this is fucking wild. Like look at this, look, when you look up at night and you look at the stars, it's like, holy shit, we're on a, you know, like,
and it is like
it is,
stoner thought, but at the same time, I don't understand how people don't see it that way. Like when I say it's magical how we're here, and that our bodies do what they do, and women just produce babies that do what they do, and like wild, absolutely magical. People are like, don't say magical, it sounds woo woo. I'm like, this is woo woo.
Life is woo woo.
Freaking crazy that we're here just living, doing it, but like. I don't know. But yeah, to go back to like just the little things, it's definitely like gratitude for all of it. But that's interesting that you kind of go big rather than like little every time. But
and I think what I needed was for you to lay it out in that way, because now I see the importance of the little things, right? And I feel like that's always what it was like. And this is a way bigger issue for me. It's not an issue. It's just a part of who I am. I always needed reasonings why. That's why I struggled so much in high school, because it was like, learn this. Why? Why am I going to need like, and if you could show me, and some teachers were great of like, oh, you're going to need those, or this is interesting, you're going to want to know this. Oh, get me excited. Then I was all in, and I would learn it. But like, I always had to question why, and like, why do I have to do it this way? Like if there's not a good reason, like it's this thing. I have this really weird, like almost autistic obsession with efficiency and doing things efficiently. And like, if there's not a good reason for me to learn this, I could be spending my time doing something else or getting more out of life. Like it's so weird. And I love that about myself, but sometimes it definitely doesn't serve me, right? And I have to be constantly asking that question, because it is so overarching and it's everything. And that's when I get to that of like, okay, I'm doing gratefulness now. Like I'm wasting my time on all these little things, because like the biggest one, and it prevents me from getting there. But then when you lay it out like you did, I see the value in it. And I think now the next time I sit down, it's going to change that. And when I go to jump to that, I'm like, no, I know why. There's a reason. Now that I know the reason why, I won't struggle with that, which is so funny. It's just a small reframing. But for me, just the way my brain works, that's everything to me. And I know that, and I try and look at that all the time, because like, I know I'm like that. So I have to operate understanding that and make sure I'm diving in. Why am I doing this? Right? Like, is it, and that was things like, you know, having that big fancy job, and that of like, okay, why am I doing this? Like, for all these. And when I got down to it, was all societal things. It's the way people look at me. It's the monetary value of it and all that. It's like, that doesn't really hold value to me. Like the why is not really holding up, right? Whereas my why is for doing this podcast, like I already mentioned a couple of like being able to do the things that like Aubrey Marcus did for me, or Lex Friedman, right? Like that is a way bigger why to me, right? And that allows me to pursue it differently than I was pursuing that. I was just doing that to show up because I was told to, right? Like it wasn't for me, and that's a much different thing. And I think that's another thing that I've talked about a million times on this, but knowing your why is so important. And for people to ask that question, if your why is just, well, that's kind of what society's told us, you know, I was supposed to go to school, I went to university, I was supposed to get this job. Is that a really good why? Is there a better why that you could have that would serve you doing something else? Like it's a really important question to ask, but again, it's painful and people don't want to sit with that a lot of the times.
And they say when your when your why is strong enough, the how grows legs. And I love that, because like, oh, it's so true. Like the why doesn't matter. You're not going to get there. Like you're going to trudge through and just procrastinate or whatever. But having a strong why is huge. And I find lots of people may even be the way you are, where they need that why, but they don't realize.
For sure.
That they need more of a why, so they just stop there instead of actually asking. They'll either feel frustrated or in their head or unsure.
Or they rationalize something.
They rationalize and they're like, oh, that's just not for me, rather than being like, but why do they do that? Like, how could this make sense? Because I feel I hear things too.
Yeah.
But if someone else says it and words it different, I'm like, mind blown. Like,
Exactly.
I get it.
Like,
I'm like, your way works. And they're like, mine's the same. I'm like, not that way. Like, it's
like,
explain different.
One of the biggest things in the last couple of years that have like completely rocked my world and changed so much, and it comes back to Aubrey, was religion. I had no time for it because the way that it had been explained to me up until then, like going to church as a kid and stuff, it was like, people were just like, no, you have to believe this stuff. This is what it is. I'm like, why? Why? And you weren't allowed to ask why. And I hate it. And I rebelled against it so hard and just put it into this box in my head where religion is stupid. Religious people are stupid. I don't want anything to do with it. And then when you hear someone like Aubrey, who it's not even some sort of denomination or other, but just kind of breaks it down and words it in a way that you can understand the power of religion, just completely opened this door I didn't know that was within me, and so many things made sense, so many things fell into place. And then I can listen to a rabbi talk, and I can listen to an imam or any of these religions, a Buddhist, and they're all talking about the same thing with different words. But once it took that switch to be able to see it, and for someone to word it like, and I think Aubrey is one of the best people in the world, just however he words it speaks to me, right? Like, and that was hugely impactful. But all it was, it's not like religion changed. Religion's been pretty much the same way. I just the way, and the way it'd been communicated, we just never hit me in the right way from those understandings to really take hold and really, impact you. And then once they do, it opens this door and it's a floodgate of all these, because to pretend that there's nothing worth knowing in religion, which is what I was pretending, there's nothing worth knowing. That's ridiculous. These things have been around for thousands of years. They're clearly, and not just, that doesn't absolve them of the suffering and the pain that religion has caused as well. I'm very cognizant of that. And I think that was the other side. I was like, this is so silly. It's caused all these wars. It's caused all this stuff, but I never got to see any of the positive that came with it. Once I did, completely threw it on its head, right?
Yeah. I feel that I never understood religion. I just seen certain things. I was like, that doesn't sound like that's really religious or right. But I judged it, and I wouldn't take people serious, which is like biased of like certain beliefs. But it's interesting. I haven't heard Aubrey Marcus's on that, but I read A New Earth, and it talked about religion.
Okay.
A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle.
Oh,
that is unbelievable.
Good old Eckhart.
I'm not finished because I want to try to like digest things and really like, rather than just read it and regurgitate, I want to embody it before I can, because I think there's so much power in it. But they talk about religion, and same thing. He's like, religion's basically the same thing, but just an Asian guy explained it, an Indian explained it, and we're all
100%.
But the worst part is that they see it as, okay, I'm right and something else is wrong.
Exactly.
Rather than like, hey, religion is meant to actually bring everybody together to realize everything's the same.
Yeah.
But it's just explained in different ways. And I was like, wait, what? Like, why is everybody fighting that if like that's kind of what it is, and that it's all meant out of the same kind of like good place in the heart. Yet it just has its little differences. Yeah. And then they talk about kind of just the religion, and they bring in spirituality a bit as well, and what that has versus religion. And really, really interesting to just
and so much of it is it's the dogma that causes the problems. It's not the actual ideas itself. It's the dogmatic belief that gets you into these structures thing that puts you in that framework that says I'm right, you're wrong, right? It's this, like, it's the spiritual underpinnings of why they do this, and the narratives and the stories that they're telling. It's not the actual, right? Like, it's not it's not parting of the sea. It's not the walking on water. It's not and that's what would get me like that. That's irrational. It's the stories that are telling the
main kind of,
it's the allegories behind it that is important. And it's all the same allegories. They just have different stories to convey them. Right. Like, and, the nicest thing about getting to that point is that from the point I am now is I can get so much out of religious thinkers because I'm so unattached to any of the dogma. I'm just there for the teachings, for the wisdom it can provide. So like throughout this podcast, I've had some pretty interesting conversations, but I'd say if not my favorite one I've had, it's got to be like top 3. I was able to not sit down, it was over Zoom, but I got to converse with a rabbi, and it was one of them, like, I get goosebumps just thinking about it. Like, we had one conversation just to get to know each other that wasn't recorded. It was for a half hour. It was probably one of my most amazing conversations I've ever had that no one will ever hear. It's just for me. Yeah. And then got to sit down. We did, I think, an hour, and I got to get him on again. It was awesome. But like, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, I'd be like, no, you got someone else. Like, if you would have told me you'd be sitting down with a rabbi to have a conversation, like, I'd be like, no, I am not that person. Like, that sounds ridiculous. But like, and to know that, and to know like with those, it's almost like a limiting belief, like to come back to that of like, what I was held back from. And now once you get to the other side of it and you see all these amazing ideas and powerful understandings and pieces of wisdom that you get from it, I would have never, ever known that. And I wouldn't have known what I didn't know either. I would have been completely ignorant to it and just keeping on my merry way. Cause it's not like my life was all that much worse. Like, I guess it was because I didn't realize what I was missing. But if you don't know what you're missing, you're not missing anything at all, really.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
which is such an interesting thing to have to try to explain to people. Because now, like, when you have the perspective, you're like, who wouldn't want this?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, who wouldn't want to just be open or like know that there's more that we don't know? Yeah. But like, I guess if you just don't ever step out of that, you don't know what you're missing out on, which is like.
And I think that's what's so tough because, that's really interesting because when you say, who wouldn't, I don't know what you just said. It was who wouldn't want to know this or who? Who wouldn't want to know this? When I look back, I go, me 4 years ago, right? So it's so easy for me to understand that, how easy it is to not want to know this because of how easy that is. But if you've come up, if you're this religious thinker that has gotten this positivity from the time you were knee high all the way up, you don't know that. You are stuck in that of who wouldn't want to know this because you were never that person. But for someone that has been on the other side of it, I understand it, right? Like, that's interesting. And I think the best religious scholars and speakers will understand that and maybe they've never experienced it, but they can have enough compassion to see the other side of it. But I think that's almost what sticks so many people in the dogma of just cutting it there, of not looking anywhere past it. Like, who wouldn't want to believe this? And if you don't, sorry, there's no room for you. You're going to burn. Yeah. But if you do get it, we're always welcome. If you do change your mind, come on over. But like, they still can't understand that person that wouldn't want to, right?
Yeah.
It's an interesting thought. I've never thought of it that way.
Oh, and it's interesting. Do you know much about ego?
Oh, yeah.
And that New Earth talks about a lot about that and how none of us really are our religion. Like, no one's born Christian. It's what our ego holds on to and our belief of it. And like, ego we want to be something, and everybody who's not that is wrong.
Do you want to just spin the mic around? Just grab it and just spin it like that. Yeah, there we go. I think it's just because the cord's pulling it that way. There you go. Beautiful. And
so...
Oh, now I can hear you perfectly.
So with that, our ego wants to hold on to something, and whoever's not in that is wrong, which is like the idea behind religion is to like realize that we are all of one, and one's not right, one's not wrong kind of thing. And ego, it's really interesting to know more about it and how it just wants to be something because it plays such a huge role in our life until we realize our separation from it. But I don't think anyone really truly knows because like it's our ego talking sometimes.
and again, like looking at the compassionate lens of that was very important for us to have that, for us to survive for a long time. You needed that. And so much of it was, you are evolutionarily built to look for the other in other people. You have your tribe and this is what we believe. And anyone that falls outside of that, if you look differently or you act differently, have a different language, that is threat. Right. And it was such a world of scarcity, which is so different now. We're in a world of abundance and we just, our programming hasn't caught up to that, but that was so natural and so innate to us that we need, it's so funny to think that this is a good metaphor for it. But when you see a boat on the horizon, people showing up nowadays, maybe they're tourists, maybe they're visitors. For thousands and thousands of years, that meant death, that meant rape, that meant pillage. When you see people coming, that was a bad thing. And that's deep in us. Right. And this othering that would seem so natural to do, right? The COVID thing of just to other this group of people. I can't even understand why they would think that way. That is so natural within us. And that ego is super important. That's what ego is, what allowed us to still be here. If not, we would have, died in the trees, still monkeys. Like that is so important. And you have to have love for that, right? Like so many people talk about killing their ego or caging their ego, right? Like I can't remember, this may be Aubrey, it might be someone that he had on the podcast, but someone talked about like your ego is like a tiger. And so many people just think, my ego causes bad things. I got to keep it caged up and I got to, keep it under control, right? Because if this tiger's just running around, if your ego's just running around, running your life, it causes some harm and it causes suffering and all that. Yeah. But that's not the goal. The goal isn't just to cage it up. That's not good either. It's, you need to learn to walk with this tiger and to keep it under control and let it, there's times where you need to let your ego, like, and sometimes in a business meeting where you need to stand up for yourself or sometimes in a relationship, you need to, your ego can protect you. But it's about learning when
compassion
it serves,
kind of thing again goes back to like the compassion for it, learning to walk with it rather than like, because if you try to just cut it off, like it's a part of you, walk with it. I love that. I love that idea. And that's the and I've heard it also put in the terms of like
who's driving the bus. Like you can let your ego drive the bus at times. And if you just say like, you can never drive and you're always fighting to keep him outside, sometimes he's going to get loose. And when he gets at that wheel, he's going to go nuts. And cause he finally gets the time to drive, he's going to drive you right off a cliff or whatever. But if you talk to him and say, okay, there's going to be times where you need to drive and I need to let you free. And when it serves me, you can drive. When it doesn't, and you can get that, you're going to be a much more actualized person. Right. And it's so much of that idea. And I think, I'm a big proponent. I think psychedelics are something that really helps people ask those questions and get in touch with their ego a little bit instead of just living in a world where they don't, right? And there's a million different ways you can get to it through meditation. It's just one of those other things. But just personally for me, that was one that completely changed. Just
makes it a bit easier to kind of strip away from that.
And it really throws it in relief of like, I can see, like where before I just didn't even know what, either I was driving the bus or ego drive the bus. I never knew the difference. Yeah. And then it really kind of highlighted like, and to show like a lot of the times the thing I didn't like the things I didn't like about myself and things I wasn't proud of, you can see it come back to ego. And when it wasn't serving you and letting it drive the bus when it shouldn't have been, and not being in control and not even be able to choose when or when not. And you'll never 100% be able to choose, but it's that journey of trying to get there. Right. And that's, growth. Yeah. That's, I love ego. I love talking about ego. I love thinking about it. Yeah, no, and I think that all comes back to people like Aubrey and the people, and I say Aubrey, but it's not just Aubrey. It's the people that he attracts and the people that he has on and the people like,
just the stories and the stories. And
and just these amazing people that within their field, they are an expert and they have dedicated their life to thinking about these type of topics. And then they come on, they talk for a few hours and they just have these, and Aubrey is such a good facilitator and he's so good at bouncing back and forth. Like, again, like it's so funny when, like people say like, oh, you're just copying Joe Rogan. It's like, you have no idea. Like I am for sure. But also like, there's so much Aubrey Marcus. Like if you know Joe Rogan, so you can see it. But if you listen to Aubrey Marcus, like when you listen to my podcast, you probably hear a ton of Aubrey Marcus in it, because half the time I'm just parroting what I learned from him or people he's had on. And same with Lex Friedman, and all these comedians and all these people. It's like, like it's, but I love that. I don't feel any shame or anything negative about that. I'm so proud. I would love to be compared to Joe Rogan or Aubrey Marcus. Like that would fill me with joy. I think they're amazing people. I look up to those people. Like there's nothing bad in that, right? Like it's just other people's looking for an attack vector of something they can impose, which is, again, to have compassion is very natural. And that's what we do. That's insecurity. And that's what, and insecurity is another thing that I feel like is hand in hand with ego. And like, if you really thought about it, it's probably, two sides of the same coin. And like the ego comes out to protect you against your insecurities and the things that you don't. And like, the more I think about it and look back on myself and look back on other people's, how often insecurity is the engine that drives 99% of people's motivations. They just don't realize it. Yeah. Right. And the ego is the thing that kind of facilitates it a lot of the time. Right. And kind of keeps you protected and keeps you from realizing that, oh, I'm just being insecure right now. Your ego will tell you a story to make sure you don't think of it that way. Right. When you lash out at someone, like, and again, I go back to breakups. Maybe it's just because I'm in that state of mind right now, but like so much of that time is when they would bring things up about you that were true, that like, hey, you're being insecure and like, I want to go out to a bar and you're texting me and being clingy and all that stuff. Like that is pure cut and dry insecurity at its finest. Like there's no other way. Your ego's not going to let you. But your ego's not going to let you.
No, care. You're everything but.
Yeah, exactly. So it will come up with this crazy story to tell you all these things that, and you're not being insecure. It's just that they're not caring about your feelings and they're doing this. They're trying to mess with. They're trying to get a rise. Like just all this stupid different things. But then when you finally look back, like, oh no, that's just insecurity. Yeah. Like, that's embarrassing. And like all the things on the world stage, and not to bring it back to COVID, but so much of like when information comes out, the insecurity of being wrong, they construct, and on both sides, I'm not even saying it, on both sides, you can construct your ego will construct all these narratives around it to make sure that you are not wrong, because that just feels so bad. And for some reason, society has gotten so averse to ever being wrong. I love being wrong. And one of my favorite parts of this podcast is when people show me areas where I'm wrong. Oh shit. Yeah. No, now I get better. I love being wrong. I'm super stubborn. I'm like a donkey. And it takes a lot for me to get to that point. I'll admit that for sure. I'm trying always to be more open and to see the error of my ways more quickly. But when I do, 100%. Like and I'm sure there's plenty of times over the last 125 episodes or whatever it is where you can hear me in real time go, oh shit, no, you have a really good point there. I think I'm wrong on that. I think I need to change my mind. And then going forward, now you walk through the world with a better grasp on it. And I love that.
And just the acceptance of, I don't know, like the fact we can think that what we believe is so true and so right and hold on to that with like every ounce of, I guess, our ego to be right is giving compassion to it, because I'm sure I do it myself as well, definitely. But it's crazy to think that like that's how we work. We don't realize, or I guess can fall back into those times when we're like, man, he lived his whole life with that perspective and he's doing great and fine. And like, that's been his truth of like,
that's reinforcing.
Maybe that is true.
For sure.
Or like, hey, maybe I am wrong, or even that, compassion for ourselves to be wrong and acceptance. Like, I don't know, who do we think we are to always be right kind of thing, and that everybody else is wrong. And I truly think, more of that within just our views in government, anything would just be right. Would just, let us see that being wrong actually isn't a bad thing. Or even Joe Rogan, someone really awesome for that, to be like, maybe I said this wrong at one time, but like just acknowledging
it. And it's a feedback loop again. When you're wrong, if you allow your ego to tell you a story so you're not wrong, now you're not wrong.
No, you're not
I'm never wrong. So then when you are wrong, you have this feedback loop of, hey, I'm so rarely wrong, which is something I struggle with. And I think I have a very, very powerful ego, and I think very highly of my ideas and stuff that like, I feel like I was in this feedback loop of, I'm so confident that I'm right all the time because I'm so rarely wrong. And again, I have compassion for it and love for that. I do think that's true. And I am proud of that. I think I'm an intelligent person. I do, but I'm wrong a lot more than I'd like to admit. And the more I do that and can find those times, now the next time I'm more open to being wrong. Right?
It gives you confidence.
Exactly.
In that.
Whereas if you're a politician, for example, where being wrong is catastrophic, you can never be wrong. You have to spin whatever story it is so that you are never wrong, because you're always up for re-election. There's always the next thing. You're in a really bad feedback loop of never being wrong, and you're just setting yourself up for bad. And that's, I said politician, but that's the corporate world. That's so much of what we've set up. The infrastructure around it is the incentive structure makes it so that it rewards you if you can do that, and you can never be wrong, and you can always show that, or at least outwardly show to other people, I'm never wrong. And I found that myself with being in that world. You find yourself doing it, you just slip into it naturally, because whatever the incentive structure lines up for, you're going to kind of fall into it. And it's
even kind of goes back to education. I'm like, if you're wrong, you're like, that's I don't know, you get laughed at.
Yeah, like, you put your hand up in class and get a question wrong. You think you're putting your hand up as quick the next time you think you have an answer?
Absolutely not. You don't want to be wrong.
Exactly.
Like, it is not ever like, oh, awesome try. Like, hey, who wants to help him out with that? Or like just the response of like, hey, you didn't fail. You tried, which is better than not, like keep going kind of thing. I think it all kind of stems back to even that, and I'm sure it's different within like politics and stuff like that versus education, but just accepting that like trying and failing is okay, and it's never really a failure unless you kind of quit. Like quitting's okay in some things, but you got to try, and to be wrong is like, then you learned.
Yeah, exactly. And it creates a world where now when you get into university and you're in a room full of 250 people in a lecture hall, and over a course of a semester, whatever it is, 3 months, 4 months, look at how many people put their hand up and answer questions or ask questions. It's probably 1%. There's probably the same 5 people in a 200-person lecture hall that do any of the interacting with the professor. And that is a dynamic that has been built up for all those people's lives and got them to that point where now, and that's kind of a sad thing, right? Like, you would hope that it would be 50% where, because you're always going to have shy people. And I think, it's tough though, because I think that fear of being wrong reinforces the shy. And now your ego tells you the story. It's like, no, I'm not afraid of being wrong. I'm just shy. I just don't like public speaking. Right. And a lot of times
it's a label that's okay to be used that gets you an out. If you're shy, you're not going to be put out there.
Exactly.
Rather than like, I just don't want to be wrong. If you said that's two totally different things, and let's help you.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you're shy, people just kind of are like, okay, they're shy.
And that doesn't mean there's not shy people in the world. It's just you have to always be asking those questions and sitting with yourself to figure out what is it. Because if you know your ego is going to tell you stories to make it more comfortable, then you're on the lookout for the stories, which I am the king of that. My ego is just so good at rationalization, and I'm so like, I can tell myself stories up, right, down, left, center. And what I love about the podcast is, like, I find when I do it in the pod, I kind of
I'm embarrassed because I know it's going to live there forever. And when you're just in day-to-day life and you say something it's a rationalization, you can kind of just skip by it. But when you know it's recorded, it's like, okay, maybe that was bullshit. Actually, it's probably this. And you kind of admit it. And all the time, you kind of know it, which is something that I came up with in meditation. I've talked about this a lot of like so much of the traumas and things that I had to deal with. It didn't feel like I was learning. It felt like I was remembering, right? Like I knew all these things. I know these things about myself, but I had told all these stories and kind of really shielded myself away from it. But it definitely didn't feel like I was learning new information. It feels like, oh, I'm remembering. Oh, I'm kind of taking the comfortability, the weighted comfortability blanket off of these issues and actually looking at them. But like, I knew they were there deep down. Like I had all these rationalizations, but it was the weirdest feeling of like having these big, huge, like world changing ideas and not feeling like, oh, this is new. Oh, I always knew this. And I was just kind of hiding from it. And it's an odd feeling.
It's interesting, like kind of remembering, like you say that within parts of kind of like yourself. And I felt that within different things within, I guess self-discovery or I guess like more self-discovery through spiritual stuff. I'm like, whoa, this isn't so, as people would be like, that's just whatever. I'm like, I remember this. Like it feels so true. It's not like a new thing. I'm like, this is, a remembering. It's a totally different.
And it rings feeling. So true. Like I think some people think like, well, how will I know? Like, if I've rationalized it away and I've always been doing this, when I stumble upon something that's true, how will I know? And it's like, until you realize it, you won't. But I always talk about like sometimes, and I find this all the time listening to podcasts, they'll talk about something and it will ring you like a gong. Your whole body almost vibrates. Like, holy shit, that is so true. That just rung so true with me. It almost like stops you in your tracks. It's like, no. You'll know. Like,
when it resonates.
Yeah,
like you know.
Yeah. And it's like, I can't explain to you how. It's just a feel. It's again, like trying to explain to people what meditation is. It's like, you kind of got to try it and figure it out for yourself. And then once you do, you'll have your own weird way of explaining it because it's so, it's the same for everybody. Also, it's just slightly different for everybody. And everyone's mind is processes things differently. So you have a different way of explaining it. But like, with those big things, it's such a funny feeling of just knowing. And sometimes it sucks. Like sometimes it's an amazing realization. I was like, oh, that is me to a T. And it's like a positive thing. Sometimes it sucks of like, they talk about a lot of like the conversations about ego and like the tricks it can play on you. And when you hear them, it's like, oh shit, I do that all the time. Like I didn't realize it till just this moment, but like, oh, that is me. Like shit, and it kind of, it's like, oh, well, I have the information now. I can't hide from it. I got to process it now. I might have to sit with this later. I might have to, this is probably going to come up next time I meditate and I'm going to have to, think about this. Maybe I'll talk about it on the podcast or something like whatever. Maybe I'll journal like we talked about. Everyone does these things differently, but it's about just uncovering it to start. That's that first step of realizing it, not letting in that moment when it hits you like that, not to just sit with it and not let the ego jump in and re-rationalize it and cover it back up and put it, lock it away, throw a couple more padlocks on that door with that room. Like I'm not going to go in there and just go away from it. Right. And again, I'm the king of this. So like, I'm not trying to preach to anybody because I do this stuff all the time, but like, it's just about recognizing it. And maybe you will, maybe it takes 6 times where you have the same realization 6 times and you just rationalize away and just, the first time you didn't even think about it, just rationalized away. Second time, oh, that came up again. I'm probably shouldn't, but I'm going to rationalize. And each time you get closer and then eventually you get to it, right? Of just like always being on the lookout and trying to do it. And hopefully you can get better so it doesn't take you 6 times, but sometimes it might. And that's okay too, right?
Yeah.
Like I said a lot earlier, and sometimes you're just not ready to process some things, right? Some things are just too heavy. You're just not in the right mind space. There's too much going on. And the shitty thing is that can be an excuse and your ego will use that of just, I'm not ready. And again, I'm the king of this. Of like, I know I need to process this. I need to work on this, but life's too crazy right now. I just went through a breakup. I can't do it right now. I'm going to leave that for later. Right? And it's like, shit. When is that true? And when is that an excuse? And that is always running through my head all the time of like, when is that? Because I know my ego is powerful and it will, if I let it run the bus, I will never work on anything. I will just stay in this comfortable little blanket and I'll be just fine there, right?
It's interesting. And also how you mentioned kind of podcasting, recording, and it's out there. Same thing I find with social media or podcasting or talking. It really gets your ego out there. Yeah. And it also is kind of like a personal development journey because you get to really look back at what you're saying, how you're interacting, how truthful you are, how you're it kind of puts your ego out there to see and analyze, which I find so scary because imposter syndrome comes up. Sometimes you do it and you're like, damn, I was good. And like, maybe it's cockiness, maybe it's confidence, but like, it really puts you out there to see, and not just for your own work, but for everybody else.
Right.
So it does make it a really vulnerable spot to kind of do the work.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a double-edged sword, because it puts your ego out there, but like lots of times it's because so many people I've talked to of like it seems like, not for everybody, for a lot of people, like the more they're posting like positive things and trying to show this persona, are the times they're doing the worst. And that is exactly what you're talking about, of like that ego that's telling you all these stories, and it's like social media at times and can almost be like handing a paintbrush to your ego and allowing this ephemeral thing that can't really bring itself to the world, and it gives it a paintbrush. Now it allows you to actually paint the stories that it's telling you, and it puts it out for the world of like, oh, I'm trying to paint the story of I'm doing good right now. I'm experiencing, I'm traveling, I'm doing all these things. And sometimes that's all that is just security blankets to stop you from processing some painful things that you're actually going through. Right. And then at times you're doing great and you just want to share it. Right. It's you never really know. And even that person might not even know what it is. They might think, oh, I'm just doing this, but deep down it's a defense mechanism. Right. And you never know. That's what I dislike about social media a little bit, is you never know. Right. Like, you might think, oh, my friend looks like they're doing awesome. And I've had this experience where I have someone on the podcast and I'm like, oh, it looks like you're doing awesome. Like from your social media, you're doing great. And they're like, actually, I'm doing really shitty. And then I'm like, oh, well, if I would have known that, I would have checked in on you. But I feel like, so now, and because of that, I've gone through that so many times. Now I'm almost on guard for it. When I see someone posting lots of positive stuff on social media, I'm always like, maybe it's good. Maybe they're not okay. Like maybe that's the time they need to be checked on, when they seem to be doing the best. Maybe that's when they need that. Hey, how you doing? And just how are you really doing? Right? Like you said earlier, like that, you have to kind of ask it 3 times before you get the actual answer. You say, oh, I don't want to get into it. Well, no, let's get into it. That's what I'm here for. I'm your friend. Yeah. Right. And I have some friends, like one of my friends, she's from Calgary, and all the time, like we chat online. We might not talk for a couple of months. We might, and just every once in a while, it's just like, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing fine. Just how you doing? And then I get like 7 paragraphs, like all this shit's like, I knew it. Like, come on. Like I'm your friend. I'm here for it. Right. Like I might not be able to, 9 times out of 10, I won't be able to actually do anything to help. I might not be able to tell you the thing you need. But so much of the time you don't need solutions. You just need to be heard. And
sometimes I've started doing it. I can't remember where I heard it, but when someone comes to you asking, do you want advice or do you want support?
That is huge.
It's easy. It's so right out there. And they're like, and sometimes I am too. And then I go and I'm like, wait, I'm sorry, like, do you want me advice or do you want me to just listen? And I'm like, it's so easy to give advice. And sometimes you're not in the spot to take it. And that's the last thing you want, is someone else to know what you're going through. And like, sometimes it helps, but others you're like, let me hurt and let me just sit in it and talk.
And I think men are really bad at not offering solution, and I think it goes back. I think I'm the maybe a really crazy example, but like the efficiency thing of like, if you're going to tell me all this and I'm going to spend the time to really connect with you, I'm going to want to give you solutions, but it's because I'm still learning to realize the value in just listening. And as I get better at realizing the value, I can stop just trying to give you solutions and trying to solve your problems. And I think also it's something of like, if you're coming to me over the last 4 years, you've been coming with the same problem and I've been giving you a solution and you're still stuck in the same shit, which I do to other people all the time. So I have to have compassion for it. But like, just realizing that, okay, well, what they need maybe isn't solutions, or maybe, maybe you're part of helping hold them back by just not being there for them the right way and trying to just offer solutions when that's not what they need. Right. Like, but for myself is trying to see the value in just the listening. And I don't need to always come with solutions, because that's my natural proclivity. If someone comes to me with issues, I want to solve them. Right.
Like, I think that's human nature. Like,
and I think I see that in my dad a lot, whereas all the time. And I feel like that was another one of my traumas growing up, of like, I was a really soft, emotional guy. I still am to this day. I am. And sometimes I just needed to be heard. And it was always solutions and, well, then deal with it or do something. I was like, no, like I just, right. And my mom's amazing at that. And she's, a psychologist and she knows all that. So I had a really good mix of it. But again, the worst thing, I've like had this amazing life, amazing things growing up. But because that was a trauma, my brain takes that and really amplifies that. And that was a huge trauma that I had to get over. I'm still dealing with it. But that's the thing that's so tough, is it feels bad to, mention things about like your parents that like you dealt differently. But when you understand the worst thing that ever happened to you is the worst thing that ever happened to you, even if you were the perfect parent all the time, you're even if you did everything right except one thing, then that one thing will get expanded to cover the gambit of what the human needs to get over, of like, they will blow that into the biggest trauma, right? It's awful to think of like, if you have some like actual awful thing, like a sexual assault or some like real, like just no relativity involved, just like an awful thing that you need to get over. But there's also almost the silver lining of that, of now relatively the rest of what life's going to throw at you is different. Whereas for me, because my big traumas are like in the grand scheme of things so small, I have a different issue of like now I everything seems big to me, right? Like a small hindrance seems much bigger, and because my scale of what I was set with growing up of what bad is to me is so much different than someone that, you know, grew up on the south side of Chicago and actually dealt with some shit. Those are some of the strongest people, right? And like just understanding that, and to understand that, and to know as a parent, and like for myself as a parent, like you will never be perfect. It doesn't matter. Like it just doesn't mean don't try. Don't, you know, like still do your best. But like, even if you are perfect, it doesn't matter. Your kid's going to be fucked up in some way, because that's human nature. Humans are fucked up. We all are. Like, and don't hold any, you know, it's hard to hold the expectations of that, of like taking that in. And, you know, like I feel guilty saying that about like my dad, but like, it's not that I love, like it's not that at all. It's just recognizing myself and being open about that so other people can hear that and parents can hear that, right? Like I think it's important to talk about. Yeah. Because that's just natural human nature.
And it happens, and it's the work we got to do, but it seems as like, I don't know. And it's sometimes, to look at the traumas, be like you said before, oh my God, those other people went through something so much more crazy. It doesn't mean that your trauma is not living in your day-to-day life still, and just compassion for all and acknowledging it. But the awareness of it, because I find it's hard to talk about it. Yeah. You're not like belittling our parents. Our parents are great, but like, even something, I was on a call once, and the girl, when her mom was breastfeeding, she couldn't get enough milk. She now has food attachment issues later, like something that the mom had zero control over. And now this girl has like, she said she'd go to the fridge and be angry if her snack wasn't there or something. She's like, I've lived from this, but it's from that moment. So like we all have these little traumas that like, they didn't mean to do.
Exactly. And there was no, and like, 9 times out of 10, there's no control. And again, when it goes back to the other piece of like the big, like they were doing the best they could with what they knew, right? When you look at it through that lens, it's like, oh, like, and then you look back and you have so much compassion. I think that was like another big change in the last couple of years, is like to look back on so much of that and just have so much compassion for them, and be so, and to have so much gratitude for the amazing job they did. Like when I can look back and be like, yeah, those traumas are still the worst thing I had, and be like, I'm so thankful that I had that. And like, yeah, it sucks to go through me working through these traumas, but I'm so thankful grateful. It's these traumas, not like abandonment and not having like any love, like in my life growing up or anything. It could be so much worse. Like I'm so grateful for my traumas. Like I wouldn't change them for anything. I love who it made me. I love who the person I am, of like what that shaped me into. Like,
I think when you realize the childhood traumas and work through it, the only way to work through it is the gratitude. Like you can't,
exactly. That's the only thing
if you don't have acceptance of it, you're never going to actually be getting through it, kind of thing, which it all just kind of compiles together, and like do the work, you notice the shit, but like you leave with gratitude.
Oh, so, and that's so, when like, that's easy for me to do. Easy is relative, clearly, but that's so easy for me to have gratitude for my traumas and to be so thankful for that, because they're relatively minor, right? But I've learned so much of like how hard it is, and to see people struggle with like real traumas, like they were sexually assaulted by a parent or something. Like, how do you have gratitude for that? It's so hard, right? So hard. And the shitty part is, if you don't, you'll always carry it unless you can find a way, right? And that might have been way too crazy of an example, but I can back it off one. So one of my favorite podcasts is Wife of the Party. It's Leanne Kreischer. She's the wife of this comedian, Bert Kreischer, who has a really successful podcast. And she was kind of going through a point where she had a lot to say, and she had given up a lot. She was a screenwriter in LA when they met, and she was doing a lot. And she's an amazing woman, like one of like my female idols. She is way up there near the top, if not the top. Like I love this lady. And she had given up a lot to have kids, and she loves that, and like has completely, like, it's not like that's a negative, but at some point she kind of wanted to do something for herself, and she started a podcast, I think 2 years ago maybe. And it's called Wife of the Party, and like she's just such an amazing person. She grew up in I don't want to get this wrong, like maybe Alabama or somewhere in the South, and like had crazy upbringing. Her mom had some severe mental health issues and dealt with it, and she had some real traumas. Like when I'm saying like I'm so grateful, like I wouldn't trade my traumas for her traumas. And she's been through some shit, seen some shit, and to see how beautiful and amazing it is, the gratefulness she has, and the way she has found, like, that is so tough for her to be thankful and grateful for going through what she did with her mom and stuff and then to be so thankful for like her dad, like to be able to watch, like I admire that, to someone to have traumas that you could not blame her at all if she didn't deal with those traumas. Like, who would I be to say if she didn't? But the fact that she did, and to know that that's out there of like, even if you have some really fucked up shit happen to you, there's ways to find gratitude for it and to spin it in a positive light, and how amazing that is, and to see the amazing life and the amazing person she got to grow to be by going through that. Right. And she talks about it like, you know, when being younger and drinking and dealing with it in unhealthy ways, and that process of getting to that place. It's like, man, that's amazing. And you see countless examples of this, of people that have been through the most horrific, awful shit and have found a way to work through it, find the gratitude where they can, and become an amazing person through it.
Yeah.
Right. And almost, this is the other silver line of like, the bigger the trauma is the bigger thing you can overcome. Right. Like,
totally. They say you can just be that much more powerful of a person. Like you have to have the toughest of tough to like have really the big things. Even Tony Robbins, same thing. Like awful childhood. He's like, I wouldn't be who I was if I didn't have this.
Exactly.
Like
exactly.
It just,
which in the moment it's tough to see that, but
and there's that cheesy thing where it's like, I don't even know what it is. I'm not something God only given you the experiences or the traumas that you're meant to handle kind of thing. And it's like, it's cheesy and you see it, but it's like
cliches are cliche for a reason.
True, like 100%. Totally true. And it's one of those when you're like, man, this is so tough. And even things that happen now, I'm like, I wouldn't call it traumas, but when I'm in the deepest, darkest spot, there's this one thing, and it's like another cheesy little thing, but it's like when sometimes when you're in the darkest spot, you're actually planted to be able to bloom. Right. So it's like, right now is like what I need, and just like embracing the suck. Because like, what else are you going to do? And when you have such perspective, when you get to those after such hard times and like being grateful, now you're in them and you're like, man, this sucks, but like something good's coming. Something good has to come. And
and then when the good is there, the more
good it can be.
Yeah. Because like when you have the valleys to compare to the peaks are better, right? Like if you're just, and that's why you see so much of like people that grow up in, you know, and it probably sounds, because I'm so privileged and I'm not too far off from this, but you see these kids that grow up with like movie star parents, or right, where they have amazing high peaks and their life has so much amazing to be, but they have there's no natural lows that give them the comparison to show how high those are, that they almost create them from, so they get into addiction, they go down these really dark paths, almost like they need
they need to experience that.
Exactly.
Really,
right. Like, and you see that. And I think for a lot of people, they go like, how do they, like, they have everything. How do they go down these paths? Like, how do they get so fucked up? It's like, that is completely, that makes 100% sense to me. It almost would blow my mind if it didn't, when you see like these really fully actuated, like well-rounded people that came from that. That's almost more surprising than it is the other. Like, I would almost expect for them to go through some shit, right? Like, you know, if Obama's kids turn out to be like these amazing people, like, I'll be, holy shit, that's amazing, right? Like,
you almost gotta fuck them up in little ways.
Exactly, right? Like, give them.
Then again, they're all doing the best with what they know.
Exactly. Like, and that's like where I look at like my parents of like, they knew that, like, I don't know if they knew, but they acted as if the actions they took seemed to me as if they had an inkling of that, because they always made me work. They always tried to instill different things and tried to make sure that I wouldn't fall into those same traps, and tried to kind of like, we were decently well off. Like, my dad worked his ass off. Like, he was an electrician up in like the Nipissing patch, and like would come back, and then he started, you know, a fuel business and really grew it and all that. But just to say, like, he grew up on a farm. He didn't have anything handed to him. He worked and busted ass to get to the place that he was, or that he is. But even though I never knew until I was probably like 16, 17, I didn't know like how successful he was, or like what he had accomplished, because they had really hidden it from, like, I remember being like, I must have been like 5, 6, 7, like in those, like one of my first memories. And I remember asking, it must've been something at school, getting bugged or people making jokes. And I asked like, Dad, like, are we rich? And he just said, no, we're not rich. Like, we're well off. Like, I can't remember what the wording was, but he like, and it really sticks out that like when I said it, he like
acknowledged that what he said could really shape how you kind of
and I could see, and I could see that it impacted him, and that he really almost, he didn't get mad, but he didn't like the question he got. Like I could, when you're a kid, you notice change. You don't know what it is, but you could tell like almost like his body language changed. He stopped what he was doing. Like he tried, like he took his head and like made it. And like, it was important to like make sure that, and as a kid, you go, okay, no, like that was serious. And you made sure. So, okay, we're not like, we're not rich. Like that's, and then like, you always have to work, right? Like I had a job. This is the first time, like, I mean, podcasting is a job, but like since October, this is the first time I haven't had a job since I was 11. Right. Like I worked in and nepotism at its finest maybe, but like it was working in the jet fuel tent, putting stickers on jet fuel drums when I was like 11, probably, some child labor laws against that or whatever. And then I worked in like the C-store again for my dad, like from the time I was, I think 13 to like 17. And then I worked in the truck shop doing heavy duty mechanics for him still, like again, within that realm. And I think, that has all other things that come with it, but I never didn't have a job. And then when I went to university, I ran that dodgeball league while I was there. So like I always had something I was doing. And I think that's because they made it apparent that is very important, right? Like they never really, I don't think they ever really explained why it was that important. Maybe they did and I'm just not remembering it, but like they just, from their actions, I could tell, oh, this is important, right? Like having a job, working is something that has value to it. And it was very clear from how they acted. And I'm thankful for that. I have so much gratitude for that of like, I very easily, like all things held equal, they could have fucked me up so well, so good. Like the fact, like not to say I'm not fucked up, I sure am, but like, like they did such an amazing job, like given the dynamics that they had to work with of like in the places where it was easy for me to fall down a bad path, they actively intervened and helped steer me away from it. Like that's just to look back on it. And who knows, maybe it wasn't conscious at all. And they were just, thinking they had no bigger plan of it. And it just worked out nicely. Who knows? Maybe I have to ask them about it, but yeah, it's interesting to look at, look back on it.
Yeah, totally is.
Yeah. I see also another thing, again, through social media is kind of thing. Like it seems like you have quite an affinity and hold value on travel and adventure. I'm curious kind of to start, like where do you think that came from? Was that again, like, was that always within you? Is that something that you picked up along the way? And then also maybe just in your own words, what gives that value to? Because I'm very much the same way, maybe less adventure, more travel. I do like adventure too, but I'm also a little bit homebody, but I'm just curious in your words of like, where does the value lie in that? What do you get from it?
I think just the freeness and perspective and just difference. Like I like traveling different places. And I think even, we traveled a little bit growing up, like we went to Hawaii and things, but
I love Hawaii.
I just loved, being able to see different places that again, kind of, I guess, like just brought gratitude to more where I am or more perspective. I'm definitely someone who like, the more I know, the more confidence I feel. So like the different places I can see, it just fills me up. So
different
even
types of people
different people. And I think another thing initially was traveling. Like when I first really, really fell in love with it. Like I loved outdoors, but it was after high school. I knew I wanted to get away. I seen some different people travel and go to like Thailand. I was like, I'm going to do this. And I think it was just more to find myself. Like all my friends were going to school and I was like, like traveling's going to be that place where I find that. So that was my initial thing. And then I ended up going alone and went backpacking for the month and was just.
Where did you go first? Where was the first place you went?
In Thailand we went and I ended up meeting up like with a group there, but we went to Bangkok and then took a night train down to like Phuket and kind of went to some islands there.
Cool.
It was beautiful, but I was able to just.
And like bumping into that group was just coincidence? Like you went there alone or did you kind of plan it?
I went alone and planned to meet with the group.
Gotcha. Okay.
So then I could still like be with some people
100%.
And a little bit more
That's
like
the best
confidence.
way to travel. That's the only real traveling I've done on my own that wasn't with my family was doing Kentucky tours, which is exactly the same thing where I went alone, but I knew I was going to be with a group. So to have that security. And also I'm a terrible planner. So like to have things planned where we're going to be here and you just got to make the bus. That was perfect for me. And it was that exact mix of like, the independence and being on your own to have the freedom to learn those things about yourself that you need to, but the freedom to not, pass out in a ditch somewhere blackout drunk or something. Right?
Like a little responsibility, but like I loved the independence and finding myself was kind of the initial thing. I was like, I don't know what I want to do, but like school is not it. So like get me somewhere. And just that month there, just, the independence of seeing things on my own, being able to meet different people and see different people that were doing things that weren't like university and just knowing there was more out there. And I think I fell in love with that there. Just the experience, the culture, the people, and then the culture shock, like seeing what other people live with and coming back here and being like, oh my God, I don't have to scoop the water to put in my toilet to flush it. Like, damn, are we lucky? Like we've never had to
perspective at its best.
We've never had to question it. Like the water's always there. The water's always warm. The food's always in the fridge. Like it's just more perspective on like the life that we live, and that we can get so trapped in our bubble, in our world where we are. Yet there's others out there that are like experience different. So to put myself in those positions with less, to really kind of like try on their shoe for a little bit and be like, whoa, it just,
Because I think everybody thinks that they know that, right? Because like, even if you never travel, even if you've never left Alberta, say, you know that there's people around the world that, you know, like, through just different media and TV shows, and, you know, you see the UNICEF videos of like starving children, you know what's out there intellectually, but it's much different to just in your head kind of know it's out there somewhere than to experience it. Like to actually go through it and to see it and to interact with it is so much different, and it really sticks to you, right? Like, just like, you know, people can talk about religion all at once, but it takes that person to open that door and make it really speak to you, right? That's the same thing with like experiencing things, going out there in the world and to see it differently. Then you know it's out there and you remember it and you take that back with you. Almost you leave a part of you there and takes part of that with you wherever you go in the future, right? Like that's a much different experience. And I feel like that's what's so hard is, again, if somebody never travels, they never know what they're missing because they think they know what it's going to be like. They think like, oh, I've seen it I've seen London on TV. Like, I know, and that's a different thing than Thailand, but just like even something like that. Like I've seen the Eiffel Tower on TV, but just, it's a different thing of like, just going there and experience it and seeing the people and how different they are and just different in different ways. And like even small things of like things you take for granted that aren't even like luxuries, but like just to see how people do different, like what's a good example? Okay. So like in North America, if you go to some event or something, there's lines, right? And you kind of line up, right? In Europe, it's not like that. It's kind of more of free for, there's kind of lines, but people, but like it's a much different dynamic, right? Like not completely, but like you notice little things like that. It's like, oh, this is not, they just do things differently here, right? Like, and it's interesting to see of like, oh, like I just take for a given that just people line up, but like, it's not like it's that route and people don't bat an eye at it, right? It's just kind of like how badly do I want to get to the front of this? Like if I really want to, I can. And like, if you see someone, okay, they must want to get up there more than me, but like I know I could do that too, but I'm just not going to put that in. So it still works. Like, it's not like, it's not like a broken system. Their system works. It's just a different system than how we do it here. And that's like just the one example I can think of, but there's so many things like that where it's almost not even like it's not like, you know, Paris or London is like third world compared to America. They have almost the same privileges, just different ones, right? And to see that is interesting too. And then to travel to places like Thailand to see, you know, or even Mexico to a certain point. I guess if you stay on a resort, it's different. But like when we would go to Mexico, we would always, we'd go to Puerto Vallarta a lot. And we'd always leave and go like into towns and like, and actually see it and like go to the little vendors and go to like restaurants there and you see just a different way of life and you pick up on those things of like, oh, we are very, very lucky, right? Where you see kids that are like 5 years old with a you know, box full of chewing gum and little bracelets that are trying to make money that are like 5. It's like, man, like, oh, it makes you thankful for the childhood you had. Like, I never would have had to do that, right? Like, it's just
it changes you. It definitely changes you. And you can see that, but then you come back here a different person. Like you really look at, the luxuries here or different things here, or just, take life for the knowledge that we have for granted so easily if we don't experience those things, which I think is huge. Because then I leave a different person. Like I'm reacting different to the world around me because my perspective is more opened, that like I don't need to act so privileged because like, who am I? There's people out there with less. And it's not that like I can't be grateful for that, but just more compassion for all when you see it in like true real. Because you can see it on TV, but when you have to shower in the cold for like a month, you're like, oh my God, this sucks. Like it's doable, but
but you realize the benefits of what you get. Yeah. And no, I just think people, that's always when I talk about travel in the podcast, which comes up a lot because I do love travel and I love what it gave me, but I'm always trying to find the right words that are going to at least get people to understand. You'll never be able to feel those feelings, but to understand how different it is and to for the reason of trying to get people to travel, because if you've never traveled, I'm so thankful that I got to travel as a kid, because now it's not that scary. It's exciting to me. But if you've never left, imagine.
People are a little terrified, but it's one of those, it is so unknown.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I like it and especially I prefer to travel alone.
Yeah.
Because I am now that person that is totally different. Like you're in a scenario you've never been in your life where you get to just show up as what you want, your perspectives. Like it's just such like a kind of a surreal moment when like you get to take that all in. It's all brand new. You're new in that moment kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I ended up hitchhiking one time.
Wow.
It was only like not that many people, but I think that was like another free moment where I was like, holy shit, like traveling kind of gives you that in a way. But that was, I wish the world was more safe because I'd probably do it more. But it was, I went to Shambhala and I needed to get to a work event in Kelowna.
Yeah.
So I hitchhiked through a couple people, and just that unknown was so invigorating.
Right.
Like, who's going to pick me up next?
Yeah.
What's going to happen next? Either I walk, like, do I come across an animal? Someone picks me up? Like, what's the next town? Totally unknown. And I find some people, that's like the uncertainty.
Yeah, that's some people's nightmare.
And that, like, thriving. I was like, I don't know, but like.
And that's great to realize about yourself, that you can thrive in that. Because like you might think, oh, that might sound scary, or some people might think that's their nightmare, and when they got in it, they might realize, oh, this is who I was meant to, but you just don't know until you're in that situation.
And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with being uncomfortable, which I try so hard to push myself in, is doing something uncomfortable every day.
Yeah.
Because you're becoming a new person in those moments. You're changing, you're evolving. Like, who are you going to become in a situation you've never experienced?
Right.
You don't know.
Yeah.
And that's like fun.
I
don't know. It's really cool because
it's almost like
change.
the most fun. But if you don't know, if you've never done it, you don't know what you don't know. Interesting. I want to ask about Shambhala because I feel like so many of my friends have so many amazing stories, and that just sounds like an experience. I want to go. My friends tell me that I'm not built for Shambhala and I wouldn't like it, but I'm like, I don't know. It also sounds like something that maybe like I was meant to be there and I should just live there year round. For people that don't know, Shambhala is a music festival in BC, southern interior BC, I think.
Yes, in Salmo, BC.
Salmo, yeah. And it's just an amazing festival. It sounds like, where there's like different stages, and each stage is booked differently to have like
different vibes of music. Some are groovy, some are like more heavy, some are really chill. There's about 7 different stages that go basically all day. They go until 6 a.m. So like it's your choice that you have to go to bed. But I explained it as, have you ever seen Halloween Town?
No, I haven't.
Movie. It's an old movie that would be on at Halloween time.
I've seen of it, but I've never actually watched
when
it.
they go to the other place and it's the Halloween Town and it's all adults in costumes, that's basically Shambhala.
Yeah.
It is the nicest place you will ever be in the world for the humans that are there. Like nobody's there to judge. It is full of love and compassion, whether you're dressed up completely naked or in your regular flannel and jeans. Yeah. You are welcome and accepted.
You're accepted,
And it's just an experience. Like when people say you're going home, I understand what they mean because you're going to a place where you can be fully, freely authentic and learn who you are through the expression of others, art, nature, music, and you get to embody that. Like it is absolutely magical. You don't have to do drugs, but it's the one place the drugs are. Like, you're not allowed to bring alcohol. They check your vehicle for booze before you go in. Like, that was surreal to me. And at first I was like, this is a little weird.
And there's going to be so many people listening that will absolutely put their brain in pretzel.
They're like, what? But I'm like, you go to Big Valley and binge drink for like 7 days. I'm like, but that's normal. But what's different is Big Valleys, there's fights. There's people stealing stuff. There's campers getting broken into. It's hectic. It's a good time, but there's a lot.
Yeah, it's wild.
You go to this and I'm sleeping and it's 5 a.m. and this guy's like, oh my God, like maybe I should wear my sparkle pants. And this dude walks up. He's like, dude, like you look great and wear the sparkle pants. and it's just like, you're like, that would not happen. It's quiet. It's calm. People are loving. Like, it's just a different place. You can still have a heck of a good time.
Oh yeah.
Because like you can, but it's not that. I don't know. Everybody's more in themselves rather than Big Valley. You don't really, like, if you see people drunk, you don't really know the real them. Yeah. Like, you're like, oh, I partied with you. And then you meet them sober. You're like, who's this guy? You don't know them. Yeah. This, like, you meet people for who they truly authentically are, which I think is so much deeper.
Yeah. It's a different incentive structure. Like we talked about earlier, where like, and like really amazing things are incentivized of like being truly open about who you are. And like the only thing that's you know, putting on a show of who you aren't is the only thing that is going to like set you apart from the crowd, which is so weird, where 99.999% of life is if you step out and just be who you, which I do all the time. And I feel like this is just like, I'm always that weirdo.
You're weird. You're looked at, or you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. I'm loud. I make weird jokes. I'm always being a goofball. Right. And like, that's usually in society negative, but like, to not be that is the odd one out when you're there. And I've been told that I if I was to go, I'd be a big fractal forest guy. Never been there, but apparently I'm supposed to, that's what I've been told by people that know me quite well. So no, I still plan on going there just because that sounds like everything I love, like for that reason. Right. And I love the music too, but like, I don't know.
It's just, it's an experience that like, I think anybody should experience. Like, definitely it is out there. Like, it's, even myself was like, whoa, I've never seen any of this. Like, I've never seen people just comfortably walk around naked. Yeah. And like, but then you do, and they're wearing big earrings, and someone's like, oh, I love your earrings. And you're like the one thing to compliment, like, it's so loving. And it's definitely like a perspective shift, even for myself. Like, I try to really keep an open mind, but even that, like, just expanded it on what's out there and
what we're capable of, right? Like
what we're capable of as like I've never seen a collective group of humans all together and just be so welcoming and open like that. But it shows it's possible. It shows it is possible. Which is, I think that's the biggest thing that like brings me hope, is just seeing little things like that that like gives you that hope of like good possibilities.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I definitely want to ask way more questions about that. I literally asked 0 questions off of my paper when we just did 3 hours. So that's usually the sign of like the best podcast, is when I go in with a bunch of questions and I just don't even look at them the whole time. That was awesome. Thank you again for being here. Like, this is my favorite thing in the world to do, and I can't do it without people going through, because it's kind of scary to hop on a podcast if you've ever done it before. So I just want to say thank you. That was awesome. I really enjoyed this conversation, enjoyed getting to know you, to kind of how we started the podcast of like asking or talking about how I was curious to see who you would be in a conversation versus social media. It's it was fun. And I think so much of who you are definitely comes through on social media, but like you don't get the full experience. I think that's going to be interesting even for people that do know you to listen to this, because I think like, I just love the medium of podcasting. I think so much more comes through. Like, social media is great, but you're only ever getting, 80%, right? And some people are different. I think you're really good at social media, so more comes through. I'm terrible at it. Like, I'm trying to come through on social media now that I'm starting this venture, and I just can't get to, but like, it's the same things that are there, but like, I was only ever getting 80%, and like the whole 100% of you is amazing and breathtaking. And I just thought you're an amazing person, and thank you so much for coming. And I think we'll definitely have to do this again sooner rather than later, because I've probably another 3, 6, 9 hours of conversation that we could have here.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad to be on it and be able to share a little bit more about me other than social media. Yeah. I think that's all people get. And I don't show up fully on there, but like, love being able to, let people know a little bit more on me and my life. And I appreciate being on it.
Oh, well, I appreciate you appreciating it. All right. See you later. All right. That's episode 128. Once again, sorry for having no episode last week, but got lots, not lots. I got 2 in the can and hoping to record more this week. So hopefully maybe dropping the last episode of the road trip podcast with Chase this week, and hopefully record a couple other ones, and I'll not be missing another week ever again. Hopefully. Let's go with that. Other than that, have a great week. Tell those around you that you love them and all those special things. Follow me on social media. Follow the guest, Jessie. She's awesome. Great follow on Instagram, especially. And reach out and tell her if you enjoyed the conversation. And if you know somebody that maybe some of the topics we covered might interest them, please pass it on. That's how these podcasts grow, is usually word of mouth. It's not like I have ads during the other game or anything going on. So you could do me that favor. I'd really help it, or that would really help me. That would really help it. What am I talking about? That's when you know we've been talking too much. All right. Have a great week. Bye.